Welcome to the review session of the New York City Planning Commission. Today is Monday, October 5th, 2020. Before we begin our agenda, we have a special presentation by Claire Newman of the Trust for Governors Island. So without further ado, Ms. Newman.
Great, thank you so much.
Hello, share. Claire, good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Great, let's see here. Can everyone see a little presentation?
I can.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Claire Newman. I'm the president of the Trust for Governors Island. And first off, let me just thank the commissioners and Department of City Planning for giving us this opportunity today. We're very excited to share this presentation. And really the goal for today is to help provide a little bit of context for a presentation you'll see in a couple of weeks related to a proposed rezoning of the southern portion of Governors Island, and to provide an opportunity for questions and answers. Can someone go to the, there we go. So the Trust for Governors Island is the not-for-profit that is really tasked with owning and managing Governors Island and serving as a responsible steward thereof. We are 100% focused on the mission of providing an extraordinary public resource to New York City residents. And so building on that mission, and as a key part of the mayor's recovery agenda, we are thrilled to present a vision that will anchor Governors Island's future growth and development. Next slide. Before we dive in, we wanted to ground everybody in a little bit of the island basics, progress that's been made to date, and of course, a taste of its rich history. Next slide. The island is located in the heart of New York Harbor, and really one of its defining strengths is that while it's only a 5 to 10 minute ferry ride from Lower Manhattan and Brooklyn, when you arrive, you feel like you've been transported to a totally unique place, unlike the rest of the 5 boroughs. The island is about 170 acres, including 120 acres of open space, 43 of which is the new park. There is approximately 1.3 million square feet of space in beautiful historic buildings on the northern part of the island. And then as you see here, there are 2 development zones on the southern part of the island that total approximately 33 acres. Next slide, please. We overlaid here an image of Governors Island just to give a sense of the scale, because when you come and you bike around, it's hard to have a sense of just how big the place is. As you can see, it's about half the size of Lower Manhattan below the Brooklyn Bridge. Next slide, please. A very rich history to the island. It really began as a hunting and fishing camp for the Lenape. And then because of its strategic location right at the center of the harbor, right at the mouth of New York City, through the 1800s into the mid-1900s, it was occupied by the U.S. Army as part of the harbor defense system. In 1966, the Coast Guard took it over as a base. And when the Coast Guard was there, there were about 3,000 people who lived on the island round the clock. They had 14-story barrack buildings. There was a bowling alley. There was a Burger King, the only one in the country that served beer, schools, like literally everything that one would need to be able to occupy the island as if it were, you know, a part of any of the other boroughs. When the Coast Guard left in '96, I think there was a broad acknowledgement of what the island could mean for New York City residents and just what an extraordinary resource it could be for the locality. Next slide, please. And then in 2010, there was really a banner year for the island. That was the year when the island was transferred to full city control. It was also the year that we and the city of New York released a master plan for the island, which you can see laid out here. That master plan was the result of a very competitive international design competition. And it addressed all of the open space on the island, as well as a vision for a new park on the southern part of the island. And that park, the reason that this was the winning design competition is that it ingrained resiliency and sustainability into every element of the park's design. It raised the site, it created these fantastic hills, it reused materials from the seawall, there's wave attenuation. And the park itself was under construction during Sandy and was really barely impacted by the event, so much so that construction was able to restart within a couple of days of the storm. That master plan also identified the 2 development zones in the southern part of the island that I mentioned earlier, really to allocate space to help support the island's path to financial self-sufficiency. Next slide, please. And so over that 10 years, the progress that has happened on the island is really extraordinary. And when you come to the island today, you can see the transformation that has occurred over that decade. The City of New York Mayor's Office has invested, and private partners have invested over $400 million into the island, which funded the construction of the park and open space and brought infrastructure to the island. We have created dozens of partnerships with educational and cultural entities and environmental partners, including the Harbor School, Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, who really brought life and visitorship to the island and to the historic assets. And we've grown our audience. When the island first opened, there were 8,000 visitors a year, and in 2019, we had nearly 1 million. And that represents essentially every zip code in New York City, with over 80% of our visitorship coming from the 5 boroughs. Next slide. All of that has meant that today, Governor's Island has become one of New York City's most dynamic public places. In fact, the American Planning Association named Governor's Island one of the country's great places in 2019, which was a huge honor and obviously builds on the work of so many people over the years. Next slide. And so with that extraordinary progress, what we've thought a lot about is the potential to build upon that work and to amplify and grow so much of the cultural, environmental, and educational activities that have happened on the island over the past 10 years. Next slide, please. And so in thinking through what can come next and how do we now continue that work of transforming Governor's Island into a truly 24/7, 365 part of the city's fabric, we've worked with City Hall, with our elected officials, with our Community Advisory Council to define 6 key criteria for how we can think about what would guide future growth. And first and foremost is our mission, to continue to make Governor's Island a dynamic public place. Also an importance on creating this path to financial self-sufficiency. And if you look here at the sort of 3rd item on the list, really thinking through how can we utilize what is so special about the island and acknowledge its waterfront location and its unique ecology. We have this extraordinary one-of-a-kind fabric, and so let's think about uses that really complement that and enhance it. Of course, for us, what makes New York so special, what makes Governor's Island so special is a diversity of uses and users, not a monolith. Expanding participation, opportunities for public participation, and then maintaining access and affordability. Right now, you can come to Governor's Island, spend the whole day, and not spend a single dollar. And that has to be part of what happens going forward. Next slide, please. And so resulting from this work, what we've developed is a 3-pronged strategy. First, to continue to maintain, enhance, and expand open space and recreation. That is what draws so many New Yorkers today, just an opportunity to be out in green space, have a picnic, ride a bike, whatever. Arts and culture has been a part of Governor's Island's legacy from when it was first turned over to local control, and there's much more we can do in terms of public art in the island and supporting artists and small arts organizations. And then third, which is really going to be what we focus on in this presentation, is expanding use on the island and beginning that process of becoming a 24/7 place. Next slide, please. We believe that the island is ideally and perhaps uniquely suited to become a global center for climate solutions. And we were thrilled to announce this vision with Mayor de Blasio as key part of the mayor's recovery agenda, an opportunity to create a new center that fosters an interdisciplinary community dedicated to fighting climate change. Next slide. And so much of this has stemmed from New York City's leadership on the issue in general. Whether you look at One NYC 2050, the city's resiliency plan, or the mayor's pledges in the 2020 State of the City, New York City is looked to as a local leader with respect to climate mitigation and adaptation solutions. Next slide. And over the course of the past 12 months, We have worked to interview dozens of leaders in the climate field and to really begin to build out a vision for Governor's Island that can help to continue to progress the city's work with respect to climate adaptation and mitigation. And what we heard when we went out and talked to folks around the country was really 5 key themes. First is this need to be cross-disciplinary within academia, and that many people are saying that climate has reached a moment as a field similar to what happened with public health 100 years ago, where we're at a point where we need to bring together the hard science, applied solutions, and policy and communications under one umbrella to really begin to advance and see implementation of solutions in urban environments. A need for a public showcase point to give people an inspiring vision of what adaptable and resilient development can look like. A need for a center of gravity. Where can we bring together people from the financial sector, from policy umbrellas, from environmental justice communities to talk about and think about these issues, and a place to vision. A clear need around pipeline of talent and technology. Kids today, professors today, teachers today, they want to be involved in these fields. Let's make that pathway for kids really clear and really easy. And then, of course, a need to really focus on adaptation in addition to mitigation and science, because even if carbon emissions dropped to 0 tomorrow, we're still going to be addressing the impact of a changed climate. Next slide, please. What we could imagine that looking like on Governor's Island is really spread again across this cross-disciplinary field, beginning with attracting a research or educational anchor, that single user who can bring together the different parts of the field under one umbrella. Around that, we imagine growing dorm and faculty housing, small-scale convening and hospitality, commercial operations and innovation to support startups, to support innovation labs, and then very unique to Governor's Island, implanting all that in a living laboratory and cultural destination. Next slide, please. With respect to the research or educational anchor, there's a bunch of different models that we've heard could work for use like this. The clearest example, of course, is a degree granting university. Could this be like Cornell Tech? There's also a number of different university research or innovation centers in the space. Would something like that work on Governor's Island? Or even potentially an independent not-for-profit institution, the most obvious example being Deltaris in the Netherlands. Next slide, please. But we think what's probably most exciting about this and what's unique to the opportunity on Governor's Island is the bed in which you can build this. More and more universities across the country have made announcements about big investments they're going to make in the climate space. But by doing a project like this on Governor's Island, you have the opportunity to put it in a space that actually attracts the broad general public and to create opportunities for public engagement, which really wouldn't exist if you were to do this on someone's home campus. And what you do is you provide different entry points into the issue for New York City residents, aged 5 to 85. There's opportunities for school programs. There's opportunities to talk about this through arts and culture. Next slide. And for New York, and from a planning perspective, Governor's Island itself offers so many advantages and an interesting and unique canvas for an opportunity like this. We have environmental partners and educational institutions in place. Again, the Harbor School, Climate Museum, Billion Oyster Project. We have this very diverse and flexible development opportunity. We're close to the city, but you can still feel like you're stepping away and have the space to think about issues that are going to be impacting us for decades to come. And there's also room to experiment, to really show in the landscape of Governor's Island what interesting interventions around mitigation and adaptation can look like. Next slide, please. And of course, we believe, sorry about that. And we believe the time is now more critical than ever. The mayor announced that this vision will be a key part of the city's recovery agenda, because throughout COVID, one thing that has come to light and that the mayor's recovery plan so much hones in on is the link between public health, climate health, and economic vitality. And so having this be an anchor as we begin to move forward will be a critical part of the city's recovery in the months and years to come. Next slide, please. Specifically, this idea really addresses two imperatives. The first around economic recovery, and then the second around a resiliency strategy. And just by way of example, this project is projected to create 8,000 jobs and about $1 billion of economic impact on Governor's Island alone. But it is also going to, we believe, help to spur a broader industry across the city. Next slide. Next slide. How we get there. In a couple of weeks, you'll be seeing a presentation on a proposed rezoning for the southern part of the island. The northern part of the island was rezoned in 2013 to expand a broad mix of commercial, hospitality, and cultural uses. We are going to be asking for a similar set of uses on the southern part of the island and an increase in density to about a 3 FAR. We're looking for basically a broad zoning envelope that would then enable us to realize this vision over the course of the coming months and years. Next slide. Right now, today, Governor's Island costs about $20 million a year to operate. That is in large part driven by the fact that the trust operates everything that you see on the island. We pay to operate the ferries. If a roof leaks, we repair it. We pay to maintain the park, et cetera, et cetera. Approximately 75% of that need is financed by the City of New York today. This project would put us on a path to financial self-sufficiency that would enable the trust to bear the operating expenses on its own. Next slide, please. From a transportation perspective, obviously we would need to increase transportation to the island. Our plan really rests in expanding ferry access. And so, increasing the headway between ferries so that when you show up, you don't have to wait a long time to get onto a boat. Supplementing pier infrastructure to make sure that multiple ferries can come and go simultaneously, and also dropping folks closer to the heart of the island, central part of the island. And then investing in new freight improvements that would help to support both construction activities and future operating activities. Next slide, please. One question that comes up a lot with this plan is resiliency. Part of the excitement of the plan and part of the opportunity is to be able to really showcase on the island radical, creative, inspiring interventions in urban development that showcase adaptation and that showcase sustainability strategies. So there's a lot of different ways this can be approached. There have been previous proposals to create a bi-level esplanade that would serve to help transition to a dramatically elevated site. Of course, one can elevate structures and dry-proof structures themselves. There's opportunities, particularly along the southern part of the island, to actually experiment with wet proofing and floating structures, and then places to showcase wave attenuation and other technologies around specific events. Next slide, please. What you can see here is the FEMA map. The development zones themselves are largely within the 100-year floodplain. And so employing those strategies we just walked through as a part of future development is going to be essential and would be, again, a key part of the vision. Next slide. In addition, as mentioned, it's not just about adaptation, it's about mitigation. And so using the future construction itself to showcase sustainability, thinking that through from material selection to reducing energy demand to generating our own sustainable energy on site, and to continuing our history around promoting biodiversity and unique ecologies within the park and within future development are all possibilities. Next slide. And then really concluding with a series of visualizations that we worked with WXY on that take the proposed zoning envelope and this vision and come up with an illustration of what future growth on the island could look like. This shows a potential future educational building that is located right after you depart from Yankee Pier, again showing a rebuilt Yankee Pier and a destination plaza. Next slide. a visualization of what a potential living laboratory and research and development center could look like on the southern part of the island, and how it would integrate with the surrounding environments, begin to utilize both the waterfront and the upland portions. Next slide. A view along the western promenade to lower Manhattan of what a potential small-scale convening space could look like, and a greened, very green construction in the future. Next slide. A shot of a revitalized historic building on the North Island and how that interacts with potential future public art and new construction. Next slide. And then showing the park itself in the center of the island, reaching maturity over the years and framed by this future climate-driven vision. Next slide. And then finally, a bird's eye view that shows what a full build of the island under this scenario could look like as well. Next slide. We've been engaged, as I said, over about the past year in a lot of strategic planning and outreach. All of that work will continue. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with the proposed rezoning. And over the course of the coming months, we're going to be working a lot on this plan with the goal of next year releasing a solicitation to looking for partners who could join us in this development vision. Next slide. And all of that, so much of the work that has happened on Governor's Island has happened because of very in-depth partnerships with our elected officials, with island tenants, with our community advisory council, and that work is going to continue over the course of the next 9 months as we go out and solicit input on what a future RFP or RFEI could look like and how we can continue to refine this vision and make it even stronger. Next slide. So again, thank you all for giving us the opportunity to present this vision, and we would love to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Claire. I want to open it up for questions. But before I do, could you just tell us briefly, what is the zoning landscape of Governor's Island right now?
Yes, absolutely. So I think if somebody could advance to the next slide, we might have a map of the island in the appendix. One more, please. Yes. So on the northern part of the island, which is really all the part with the existing historic buildings, the island today is an R32 district overlaid by a special district. That special district, when it was created in 2013, didn't really change the bulk because the whole northern island is a New York City landmark district. But what it did was it dramatically expanded the list of allowable uses. We're precluded by our deed from the federal government from doing permanent residential. And so the R32 didn't really allow us any uses that are actually legal for the island. Today, the southern part of the island is still that legacy R32 and is also subject to the same deed restrictions. So what we're going to propose is to extend the special district to cover the whole island, and then to change the underlying mapping on the southern part of the island to a sort of mid-density mixed-use district.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our first question will come from Commissioner De La Hoz.
Hi, thanks for coming and sharing this vision, which is very exciting. I guess a couple different questions. So on the Global Center proposal, how would that center's governance be different than the existing trust governance? And what consideration for including frontline communities that have been impacted by climate change would there be? And then I have two other quick questions.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. So what we the trust what we're really tasked with is advancing the island's mission broadly and stewarding the place. We're not climate scientists, right? So what we would propose is to issue an RFP or an RFEI where we would look for a partner, whether that be a university or a nonprofit research institution, to ground lease the land from us, construct the building, and then administer the program. But via that solicitation, that would be our opportunity to really talk about what the city's goals from the center are, which, I think one of the obvious loud and clear lessons from COVID is how dramatically disproportionate the impact of this crisis was. And to say that that's going to be the same for climate is, if anything, an understatement. And so building that in upfront as one of the core goals of what the city wants to see out of this is absolutely essential. And the other thing I would add is that one of the things I think that's a real opportunity about doing something like this here is that because we have this space and because we have this public destination part of what we do, we can curate and surround that by all sorts of different actors who are invested in this space, whether that be educational partners or advocacy organizations or arts and culture organizations, so that this isn't just sort of a single user's approach, but actually rather like a place for collective action around climate issues. I hope I addressed that question.
And no, I think you did. I think the more specific you are in the RFP about those things, the better. Kind of similar to that, I mean, especially with this announcement kind of being framed as part of the recovery process that the city is undertaking, and also looking at who's currently part of your community advisory group. And because jobs are now being highlighted as such a key focus, I would just recommend that more thinking, or I don't know, perhaps more thinking is paid to including workforce development organizations, folks that do bridge programming. Like that's a lot of employment. Like, who are those jobs for? How are we, increasing opportunities again for folks who may not ordinarily get access to that kind of employment? I think that would be extremely helpful as a component of this as you move forward. And then my final thought question, if you will, on the self-sufficiency, I can imagine that when this becomes a formal process, there's probably going to be quite a few questions about the relationship between the uses, the density, and the self-sufficiency. Yep. So it would be helpful if you can kind of talk a little bit about that and how they're interrelated.
Yeah, sure. And as you said, as the process proceeds, we expect that we'll get questions on that, and we'll have much more detailed sort of explanation of that pathway. The reality is that because we are not proposing and can't do and don't want to do permanent residential, we're relying on other uses to generate revenue. And so that obviously varies depending on whether you're talking about a potential nonprofit user or potential more for-profit uses like a hotel or an office building. And all of them are going to contribute to the common area maintenance of the island, but we have modeled different sort of per square foot rents depending on that use type. And this particular mix, which includes university anchor, does create this pathway to self-sufficiency. But again, we understand that folks are going to want to see those numbers and understand that in more detail.
And any comments on the workforce side?
Oh, yes, thank you. Point well taken. We have started to reach out to those groups, but I think a formal role in the CAC makes a lot of sense. The other thing I would say is that one of the things we are excited to do and plan to do is have some formal engagement around that future RFP or RFEI, and in particular, having part of that work be deliberately focused on educational pipelines and job pipelines is very much what we have in mind. And so any suggestions you have for folks who you think would be good to be involved in that, we'd love to take them. And then we have, again, started outreach with respect to that part of the planning as well.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the fact that, there's a New York City Employment and Training Coalition that basically is the umbrella hub for a lot of the workforce and adult education providers, and it might be a good place to start there.
Yes, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Levin, who will then be followed by Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes, Ms. Newman, thank you very much for this. It's exciting to see this getting underway. We've been watching and hearing about it for quite some time, and it sounds like a terrific direction to be going in. You know, just as a matter of historical, there's a reason that residential use is prohibited in the deed. Because that deed was written at a time when our current president was very active in residential development in New York City. And there was a strong desire to be sure that this did not sort of come within his sight. Nothing to do with what you're doing now, but I just think, you know, some of these things endure.
Yes.
I'm wondering, I'm remembering back to when the city put out the Applied Sciences RFP. Governor's Island was one of the sites that was offered up. And ultimately, of course, it ended up on Roosevelt Island with Cornell Tech. But I'm wondering what lessons were learned in the course of that exercise about the feasibility or process of attracting an anchor to a project like this. It's going to take, you know, a significant anchor with a significant ability to raise capital to get this pulled off. So my question is, what lessons were learned? What do you know about the landscape of potential anchors?
Yes.
Are there folks out there who you think could be able to come together in a coalition to pull this off? And then my final question is about whether in the future there will have to be another series of public actions to suit the zoning and approve a disposition to the eventual tenant here. And if that is the case, why do this part of the rezoning, which seems like it's just going to be a first step? Why do it now?
Okay, thank you. So I'll start with the applied sciences related question first. And in the spirit of full disclosure, I was a part of the applied sciences team at EDC, whatever that was, 12 years ago. So I'm intimately familiar with that process. Vis-a-vis Governor's Island, I would say two things. You know, first, when that RFP went out, it was back in 2010. And so that was before that $400 million of investment that I described had been made in the island with respect to infrastructure, really utilities, transportation in the park. And I remember taking a tour of Governor's Island back then, and with Leslie and John and the folks who've done so much to bring the island forward to where it is today. And you really had to squint your eyes to see what it could become. The old Coast Guard buildings were still up. You couldn't drink water. There was no electricity. It was a different proposition, still with the extraordinary potential, obviously. So I do think that really helps a lot. You know, you look at it now and you say it's really there. And then second, I think, you know, this proposal, unlike the engineering campus, really utilizes part of what's so special about Governor's Island, which is its iconography and its unique location in the heart of the harbor, where you really can imagine a school that's devoted to climate actually wanting to utilize and take advantage of those landscape opportunities in a way that's exciting and additive to the proposal, and maybe in a way that isn't as relevant for, you know, a sort of more IT focused engineering school. So I'd say those two things. With respect to future actions and governance, our expectation is that this would be the last zoning action. You know, of course, can we guarantee that? Could something come up that needs to change? Of course. But this would, in our opinion, support this proposal. Our governance structure is such, we have a 17-member board of directors. Those board members approve any and all leases on the island. And so any future lease would be subject to board approval, and our board meetings are public meetings, and the mayor and then various other local elected officials and the community board appoint people to our board of directors.
So you're not anticipating needing the kind of detailed special district regulations that we saw for Roosevelt Island? And certainly not a disposition.
Right. That is going to be part, because we own the asset, there's no disposition needed. It's owned by the trust, not the city. But the detailed special district for the Southern Island is what you're going to see in a couple of weeks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think I was next.
Commissioner Ortiz, yes.
Thank you. I had the same question as Commissioner Levin, but I'm not sure that I heard it answered. I do think the idea of a climate, Center for Climate Solutions is really compelling, right? All the ingredients are there, but my question again, and perhaps you respond more pointedly, is just what is the market landscape for potential anchors? Yeah. Are there institutions? Is there a short list of pre-qualified organizations that you are aware of, so that you're not embarking on this effort and the RFEI goes out and there are no responses?
Yes, thank you, and apologies for missing that portion of Commissioner Levin's question. Yes, we have, as part of our research, we have also reached out to potential, universities and nonprofits, and we are convinced that there will be responses to the solicitation. Now, over the course of the next coming months, as we go through this process, that provides additional opportunity to do outreach and to do it in a way that's totally on the up and up with respect to procurement guidelines. But a lot of the work we've done over the last 12 months has been to really stress test this idea. And, of course, it's impossible to guarantee that this is going to come to fruition in exactly the way we've planned, but we believe that this has legs and that there are universities who will respond.
Can I just ask, it sounds like you had experience at the last RFP that was issued that resulted in the Roosevelt Island Cornell campus. How many responses were there to that?
To the RFEI, there were, I might get this a little bit wrong, but there were approximately 17. And then some of those folks teamed up or went away. And so to the RFP, there were closer to 9.
Oh, okay. That's helpful. And then another follow-up question. You mentioned there are 1.3 million square feet of space, that how much is currently occupied and how critical is this, effort to filling some of those spaces?
Yeah, thank you. Of that 1.3 million, probably 300,000 or so is occupied. We believe that, Governor's Island in the future, we don't think is going to read as, a southern island that's one thing and a northern island that's something else. And so this idea, we think, will also fill many of the buildings on the northern island, and also the northern part of the island are spaces that we are actively marketing today and that we're issuing RFPs for today. And so we're not going to stop attempting to revitalize and occupy those North Island buildings. And just by way of example, right in March, so right before the onset of COVID, maybe it was February, we released an RFP for a couple of buildings in Nolan Park, specifically for arts and culture uses. And we had a very robust response to that we're hoping to announce, some quote unquote winners of in the near future. So, our hope is that the North and South Island are going to sort of stitch together with the uses overlapping across both sides related to climate, related to arts and culture, and related to amenity for the public.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? There seems not to be any. So thank you, Claire, for the presentation. And I suspect we'll see you again in the not too distant future.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you to all the commissioners.
Okay, moving on. So just to make it official, there is a quorum of commissioners present. The time is 1:39, and we are beginning our regular agenda. The first item on the agenda is a certification for 4 UDAP designations and dispositions of city-owned property in Manhattan, Community Districts 10 and 11. Ryan Cody is here to make his first presentation to the commission. So, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan. So good afternoon, commissioners. As my fellow Ryan just stated, there are four separate applications being pursued simultaneously by HPD. Next slide, please. All 4 of these separate applications are in Upper Manhattan, Community Districts 10 and 11. 3 are 100% rental projects, and then 1 project is a open door home ownership project, also for affordable home ownership. All 4 applications requested need 3 specific actions, which are UDAA designation, a UDAP approval for each, and then disposition of city-owned land. And altogether, there will be 12 project sites, so 12 new buildings with a total of 119 affordable residential units, again, all in Upper Manhattan. Next slide, please. So here's a map just kind of outlining where all these projects are. As you can see, they stretch from about Central Park south and then to close to 155th on the north end. There's 1 project with NCP CB 11. So again, that is that 1 project in Community District 11. There are 6 in the Central Harlem Infill NCP, which is the red dots that you see. There is then 1 Central Harlem Infill West, which is near Central Park. And then finally, Central Harlem Open Door, which is that home ownership model, has 4 separate sites as well. Going forward, I will be discussing each project on its own, but we just want to give a broad overview before diving into each one specifically. Next slide, please. The NCP CB 11 project, which is in Councilmember Ayala's district of East Harlem, is on East 130th Street. It's in an R7B district, and under those quality housing regulations, the maximum FAR is 3.0. For this one, the proposed development would be 2.4. And as you may know in your CPC Friday package, this project will require a mayoral zoning override to facilitate development due to minimum lot width and minimum lot area both falling the area and the lot width both falling under the minimum for our 7B district. There are 2 other projects, 2 other development sites that also will require a mayoral zoning override for similar reasoning, and I'll point those out later. But the city and HPD are committed to building affordable housing on these small lots, and in order to facilitate such an action, these mayoral zoning overrides are required and have been drafted by HPD. Next slide, please. Here, just a sampling of what the site looks like. So on the top are 2 photos looking towards the vacant site. And as I may have not mentioned before, but each of the proposed development sites is currently vacant city-owned land. So will be an infill project. The 2 on the bottom are showing just the general block area. There is a school on the block, and then mostly residential buildings from about 3 stories to 6 stories in size on 130th Street, which is adjacent to bigger corridors. Next slide, please. Thank you. So it's, again, 100% rental project, as all of the NCP projects are, which is the neighborhood construction program. This project specifically will have 7 affordable studio rental units and will total about 4,000 zoning square feet. The building will go up to about 4 stories with 42 feet height maximum. And for all of the NCP projects, the AMI, the area median income that the applicants would need to fall under to be eligible for these units is 27% to 77% of area median income, which equates to 23,000 to 58,000 roughly for an individual, which you would assume might be in a studio. And then for a family of 4, it would be about $34,000 to $82,000 to be eligible for the NCP rental units. Next slide, please. The Central Harlem Infill NCP project, again, this one is the largest of them with 6 development sites stretching from close to 155th Street down to 125th Street. All 6 projects are in R72 districts. The R72 district permits a floor area ratio of 3.44 and with quality housing max FAR of 4.0. 2 of the projects are on the main corridors of Frederick Douglass Boulevard and West 135th Street. And both of those projects have C14 overlays as well as the R72 zoning district. And then development site 6, 109 West 126th Street will require the mayoral zoning override for because it has a width that falls under the minimum. The lot area is fine, but the width is just lower than the minimum required for R72 district. Next slide, please. So here's just a sampling of the rough areas. So we don't have all of the photos of the sites, but this just gives you a general idea of what the blocks look like that these projects will be on. On the left-hand side, the upper left-hand side, you see Frederick Douglass Boulevard, which shows a mix of residential and commercial uses. And then West 135th also has a very similar outlook, whereas the 4 remaining projects are in mid-blocks that range from about 4 stories to 8 stories of residential units, mostly apartment walk-up buildings. Next slide, please. So here the projects are just outlined basically according to geography, so that is why they're matched up. Development site 1, kind of on its own, is a 6-story building with 11 one-bedroom units and an FAR of 3.98. Development site 2 and 3 are both 6-story buildings with a total of 20 affordable units, ranging in background in terms of studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom occupancy. And then development sites 4, 5, and 6 are also 6-story buildings with a total of 27 affordable rental units. Again, with a mix of unit styles. And then on the right-hand side, you see a rendering of one of those buildings. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the Central Harlem Infill NCP West project. This one is located on 112th Street, just north of Central Park. The project site is located in an R7A contextual district in Central Harlem. Under the quality housing regulations, the maximum FAR is 4.0. This project will also require a mayoral zoning override for the pre-mentioned lot width and lot area, both falling under the minimum for the R7A district that it is in. Next slide, please. This is again, photos from the project site. So the top 2 are looking towards the site and the bottom 2 are just giving a general outline of what the block looks like. So the scale is mostly apartment buildings ranging from about 4 stories to 6 stories with a mix of brownstones ranging from 3 to 4 stories as well. Next slide, please. The project will reach an FAR of 2.06 and will include 7 units with a mixture of studio and 2-bedroom rentals, totaling about 2,500 zoning square feet. We do not currently have a rendering for this project, but we'll make sure that HPD can get that to you as this project progresses through the ULURP process. It will reach a maximum of 4 stories with a height of 42 feet. And again, the AMI is between 27% and 77% of very median income. Next slide, please. Finally, we have the Central Harlem Infill Open Door Home Ownership project, which is our 100% affordable home ownership our 100% application with projects ranging from about 150th Street down to 130th Street. Again, all in Community District 10, Central Harlem. 3 of the projects are in R72 contextual districts. And then one project on Frederick Douglass Boulevard, a main corridor, is in a C4 4D zoning district, which allows for a little bigger bulk, and it also has a mix of residential, commercial, and community facility uses. Next slide, please. These pictures, again, are just like a broad overview of the areas. So on the upper left-hand side, you see Frederick Douglass, which has a mix of uses and a mix of building heights, usually being about 8 to 12 stories. The mid blocks that the other projects are on, the apartments range from 3 stories to about 6 or 8 stories as well. Next slide, please. Altogether, there's going to be a total of 48 affordable home ownership units. They break down to be 1 studio unit, 21 bedroom units, 23 2-bedroom units, and 4 3-bedroom units intermixed between these 4 projects. Development site 1 is in that C4 4D district on Frederick Douglass. It is the largest site. They're the largest proposed building, which it will be 10-story building with 15 units. It will also include a 300 square foot retail space, which does not have a vendor yet. That hasn't been vetted yet by HPD. Development site 2 is a 7-story building with 11 units. Again, a mix of unit styles in terms of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom arrangements. Development site 3 is a 6-story building with 11 units, as is development site 4. To be eligible for these home ownership opportunities, individuals or families would have to make between 80% and 130% of the area median income, which equates to $90,000 to $148,000 for a family of 4. Upon resale within the next 40 years, that these properties would have to go to a family, again, between 80% and 130% of area median income, ensuring that these projects continue to be affordable. And I believe that is the end of my presentation. Happy to take comments and questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Let me see if there's any questions. Any questions, anyone? Commissioner Burney.
Yes, yeah, thank you very much. You did mention that there would be additional renderings coming of what the buildings look like, because I see some of them you have, and I don't know which one in slide 15, which one we're looking at, but obviously it doesn't represent all of them.
No, we only have a small smattering of renderings so far. HPD has been notified that we would like to see more renderings as soon as they can. So we're definitely trying to get some more to you very soon.
Yeah. Okay, and could you just put up the slide of the East 130th Street, the rendering of that project, which is, I think, the first one you showed.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. So I think it might be slide 5.
Yeah, it might be 4 or 5, yeah.
Or actually maybe 6. I'm sorry, Jeff. Right there.
There we go. So,
yeah.
So there seems to be a vacant site either side of the building here. Do you know what's going on there?
I do not know what's going on there. I can certainly look into that and have HPD give some more information for that.
Because obviously, if there was an opportunity to acquire those sites as well, it would be save this building from just standing alone. And the other thing is, you know, Curtis and Ginsberg are really good architects, and generally speaking, very sensible architects. So I'm a bit worried about these colors on the outside, and maybe they can be kind of constrained and have another think about that, because I think, again, these colors really don't hold up after a while.
Yeah, I'm aware that these the HPD and the development team is still going forward, looking, you know, these are illustrative renderings. They're not necessarily set in stone yet. So I'm sure there is some leeway for design changes as well.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ramprashad.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Ryan, for the presentation. Actually, I had the same exact questions that Commissioner Burney just raised. I just have one additional question, actually two. Can they provide floor plans of all the other buildings so we can see the layout? And also, will the tenants have access to the rear yard in some of these projects?
I am not, to answer your last question about the rear yards, I'm not 100% sure. I believe they do, but I can confirm that with HPD. And then the first question, I'm sorry, can you remind me of the first? Oh, the floor plans.
Floor plans,
Yes,
yeah.
we'll make sure to get those two. In the appendix of this presentation, there are some floor plans, but I know they have more details that they'll be able to provide in the coming weeks.
And I was also just one last thing curious. I'm looking at the renderings. I know they're illustrative, but I was just curious, you know, there's so many beautiful brownstones in Harlem, and I noticed that these buildings are pretty modern. Can they just speak a little bit more to their design intent when they come back around to us?
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure to note that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Levin.
Yeah, yes, thank you. So I can see that there are many challenges involved in you know, so many small projects here. And maybe when this comes back to us, or maybe you know, wondering how the developer is going to approach the phasing of these, how they're going to manage doing so many different projects in so many different places. And then on the open door buildings, whether those are going to be managed individually or collectively. Obviously, when you set these up in a home ownership model, their success also depends on having solid ongoing management over time to ensure that the affordable asset is maintained both you know, from a physical maintenance standpoint and also from a sort of the integrity of the home ownership model. And I'm wondering how the developer is approaching those four buildings, as whether it's singly or as a whole.
Yeah, I will certainly ask HPD about that last question in regards to management of those four sites. In terms of the phasing, I know that COVID has certainly added some changes to that timeline and to the structure, but I'll make sure that they know what that phasing looks like, given that it is such a large number of sites that this one development team will be creating. So I'll certainly make sure that they address that.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Further questions?
I do have a question, Vice Chair Knuckles. So I wanted to ask a little bit further on the question of home ownership. I'm actually trying to find out what the structure is. Is it going to be condominium or co-op? Because that would actually help to answer some of the grouping questions that Commissioner Levin may have based on the Attorney General requirements of having co-ops no less than half a mile away from each other. So a condo is one thing that could be standalone, a co-op can't. So if you can just get back on the ownership structure of the open door term sheet. And to go further on Commissioner Levin, in terms of affordability, having worked with the open door term sheet, it's more like a limited equity co-op in that you can only make 2% profit on the asset as you move on throughout the years. But if HPD could confirm that, that would be great as well.
Great, I'll make sure they do. And you are correct. This is co-op style, not condo.
So if it's co-op, then it would be more interesting to find out what, as Commissioner Levin asked, what the grouping is, if there is a grouping, because that would determine what maintenance would be. To give you one example, when we develop, I work at Habitat, when we develop co-ops, the first question is, you know, are you thinking about the co-op structure completely? Because you don't want to have, you know, 3-4-story buildings that are half a mile apart that are one co-op and they're all one maintenance group, and co-op A doesn't sweep their roof when they should, or, you know, shovel the snow off, and building A needs a new roof, and then building B and C start complaining that why should I pay into the maintenance or the assessment of that new roof when I don't live there? So understanding that co-op structure would really be beneficial.
Absolutely. I'll make sure they address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Marin.
My
Further
pleasure.
questions? Further questions?
No.
If there are no further questions, then this project is certified.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Moving on, the second item on the agenda is post-hearing or post-referral review of a non-ULURP modification of a previously approved special permit in Manhattan Community District 5. Our presenter is Andy Cantu.
Thanks, Ryan. Jeff, can we go to slide 2, please? Okay. Good afternoon, commissioners. This application for a fourth modification to a special permit for 590 Madison Avenue was presented at your August 31st review session. It was referred to Manhattan Community Board 5, who voted to approve the application 39-0. As a reminder, the indoor public space at the office building at 590 Madison was the subject of a special permit issued in 1977, which allowed for the bonus through-block arcade shown in red. At the same time, the as-of-right bonus covered pedestrian space shown in blue and the non-bonus seating retail area in purple were also created. In practice, these areas operate as a single contiguous space with a total floor area of approximately 16,000 square feet. Because the approved drawings for the special permit regulate the entire indoor public space, any changes to the arrangement or amenities, including within the non-bonused area, are subject to the commission's approval. Next slide, please. In 2017, the owner was issued a violation by DOB for installing wooden partitions and changing the configuration of seating without prior authorization. And the application is seeking to cure that violation. Next slide, please. To recap, the applicant is proposing to create a seating area of approximately 1,500 square feet within the non-bonus public access area with approximately 16 tables and 60 chairs that would be reserved for patrons of the food kiosk. Freestanding acrylic barriers would be utilized to define the perimeter of the seating area, but no other changes to the other amenities in the indoor public space are proposed, and the existing 32 tables and 110 chairs located in the covered pedestrian space would continue to be available for public use without restriction. Additionally, there were some outdated reporting requirements related to the closure of the indoor public space for private and community events, and the applicant is requesting some minor changes to the restrictive declaration that would streamline those requirements. Next slide, please. At the full board meeting of CB5 on September 10th, the board voted to approve the application 39 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstaining. The resolution was emphatic in noting that this is one of the most successful POPs in the city and made clear that their approval should not serve as a precedent for a future request to quote unquote privatize public space. Although it should be noted that the former special Fifth Avenue district under which this POPs was created specifically permitted cafes to occupy up to 1/3 of the area of the covered pedestrian space, which was an as-of-right bonus pursuant to those special district regulations. During review session on August 31st, Commissioner Cerullo asked whether the kiosk operator was taking advantage of the mayor's executive order, which permitted temporary use of POPs for dining. We responded that the property owner could allow dining before completion of the land use applications. However, that was not true at the time, as a separate executive order prohibited all dining, all indoor dining, including within POPs. Last week, however, on September 30th, an order permitting indoor dining at 25% capacity came into effect, which also applies to POPs. Unfortunately, our understanding at this time is that due to the pandemic, the kiosk remains closed. Next slide, please. This is a photo of the existing condition with the wood barriers and planters that are not part of the approved drawings. Next slide, please. And this is a rendering of the cafe seating area with the proposed changes. Next slide, please. And I'm happy to take any further questions.
Questions for Mr. Cantu? Any questions?
But thank you for the information, Andrew. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Follow up.
All righty, commissioners, our charge is, if there are no further questions, is to send an approval letter to the buildings department. If you are in favor of that, please say yay.
Yay.
Yeah.
Any opposed?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that?
There's a late yay.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
All righty. So the letter will be sent to the Department of Buildings. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andy. The sixth item, oh, wait, no, jumping ahead, sorry about that. The third item on the agenda is a pre-hearing review of a zoning text amendment in Manhattan Community District 8. Scott Williamson is here to present.
Thank you, Ryan, and good afternoon, commissioners. So this is an application for by Yorkville Mansion Inc. for a zoning text amendment that relates to the Mansion restaurant. The text amendment proposes to allow an unenclosed outdoor cafe on the northern side of 86th Street in the Yorkville neighborhood of Manhattan Community District 8. Next slide, please. The Mansion restaurant has been in operation since 1945, occupying the ground floor of a 4-story mixed-use building on the corner of York Avenue and 86th Street. Immediately to the north is a near-identical 4-story mixed-use building. To the north and east of this pair is a 9,000 square foot L-shaped site known as 511 East 86th Street. A 22-story mixed-use development is under construction on this site, enveloping the Mansion restaurant on its northern and eastern sides. This can be seen in the image on the left. The project area encompasses a 125-foot length of the 86th Street sidewalk. 75 feet of this length is located immediately adjacent to the Mansion restaurant, which can be seen in the image on the right. The remaining 50 feet of the project area is adjacent to the eastern neighbor's 86th Street frontage, where the 22-story mixed-use development is under construction. Next slide, please. The surrounding area is characterized by mixed-use buildings on York Avenue and residential buildings within the mid-block. The scale of surrounding development ranges from 4-story pre-war walk-up buildings to scattered residential developments over 40 stories. Carl Schurz Park is located at the eastern end of 86th Street, 1 block away from the development site. The nearest subway entrance is the newly opened 86th Street station for the Q train on 2nd Avenue. Importantly, the M86 SBS bus line provides westbound service along 86th Street and northbound service along York Avenue. The closest stop to the Mansion restaurant is located 150 feet to the north. Next slide, please. The site is zoned R10A. R10 and equivalent districts are generally mapped along the avenues in the area, extending along major cross streets. Contextual R8B districts are generally mapped on the mid-block. The corners that define the intersection of York Avenue and 86th Street, including the development site, are mapped with a C15 commercial overlay. Next slide, please. Shown on the map here are locations in the area that may currently apply for sidewalk cafe licenses. The Mansion restaurant is outlined in blue. The category of unenclosed sidewalk cafes was established in 2004 and broadly mapped via CPC action. It is defined as an outdoor area on the public sidewalk in front of the restaurant that contains removable tables and chairs. The general approach taken to mapping sidewalk cafes can be seen to follow a pattern of tracing the avenues and then extending no more than 125 feet along each street towards the mid-block, matching the commercial overlay. The exception to this is 86th Street, between the East River and 5th Avenue. 86th Street was removed from the 2004 action at recommendation of Manhattan Community Board 8. The recommendation was made due to a streetscape improvement plan for the East 86th Street corridor, which had been proposed by the 86th Street Neighborhood Association. Community Board 8 stated in its February 2004 resolution, this prohibition for 86th Street may be revisited at some future time. The portion of 86th Street that's identified here in purple reflects a 2008 CPC action to allow the length of 86th Street from 1st Avenue to a distance 125 feet from 2nd Avenue to permit small sidewalk cafes. That action permitted the Maz Mezcal restaurant to apply for and operate a small sidewalk cafe in a similar manner to that proposed by the current application. Next slide, please. The 86th Street Streetscape Improvement Plan, noted in 2004, was updated and implemented by the Department of Transportation and the Department of Design and Construction in 2015. The intent of the plan was to make improvements to the thoroughfare while facilitating the M86 SBS bus service, which runs along 86th Street and to the north at York Avenue. Improvements included the addition of bus boarding bulbs and neck downs at intersections, as well as landscaping and adding street furniture. The project area is not located in proximity to any of the infrastructure related to the M86 SBS service, nor other improvements made as part of the 86th Street Streetscape Improvement Plan. Next slide, please. The proposed extent of unenclosed sidewalk cafe is highlighted here in red. The proposal will amend section 1441 of the zoning resolution to allow sidewalk cafes in the project area only. It also amends section 1442 to clarify that enclosed cafes are not permitted on 86th Street between East River and 5th Avenue. The proposed 125-foot extent of the project area is consistent with the length applied to sidewalk cafes along streets in the area, and it corresponds with the extent of the C15 commercial overlay. The Department of Consumer Affairs applies design and operational regulations to sidewalk cafe licenses. Through this license, the applicant will expound on matters including table and chair layout, clear paths along the sidewalk in lieu of obstructions, which is generally set at 8 feet, staff servicing associated canopies, and operational hours. Next slide, please. Manhattan Community Board 8 voted on the application on March 11 of this year, resolving to approve the application with 20 in favor, 12 against, and 2 abstaining. The Manhattan Borough President provided comments on February 12 of this year, recommending the application be approved for reasons including a track record of good management and a desire to see small businesses supported. Next slide, please. So on June 18, 2020, the application was referred. The mayor signed Executive Order 126 implementing the Open Restaurants Plan, and this happened after the application was referred. The plan allows restaurants such as the Mansion Restaurant to take advantage of the outdoor space adjacent to their premises to provide outdoor seating. The Mansion Restaurant has been participating in the program throughout the summer, as you can see in the picture here, which is looking east on 86th Street, and the Mansion Restaurant is on your left. Following expressions of broad support from representatives, including the Speaker and the Manhattan Borough President, as well as the general public for the Open Restaurants Initiative, the Mayor announced on September 25 of this year that the administration plans to make the Open Restaurants program permanent. This decision was based off of the positive contribution the program has been able to play in bringing activity and vitality back to neighborhoods, as well as recovery opportunities that provide support to the restaurant industry. Next slide, please. In summary, the application does not involve any construction, nor does it request any layout endorsement from the CPC. The applicant seeks only approval for a zoning text amendment to sections 1441 and 1442 of the zoning resolution. Subject to licensing, the text amendment will allow a 125-foot length of the sidewalk on the northern side of 86th Street to be used for unenclosed outdoor cafe purposes. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner De La Hoz.
Just wondering, like, in light of what's going on with COVID and restaurants' ability to, use outdoor space, how does that interact with this particular application?
So what this restaurant is currently allowed to do under the Open Restaurants program is substantially more generous than what they're applying for. This application had just reached a stage pre-COVID that it's worth them finishing off the process to make sure that they can, at least use some of the outdoor area adjacent their premises on 86th Street, and any extension of the open restaurants program would just be to additional benefit for them.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions? If not, this is on for hearing on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. The fourth item on the agenda is a certification of a zoning map and zoning text amendment in Queens Community District 6. Our presenter is Kathy Cow.
Excuse me, Ryan. Vice Chair Knuckles, I'm recused in this matter.
That's right.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commission. This is the 9132 63rd Drive rezoning application. Next slide. So this is a private application in the Rego Park neighborhood of Queens, Community District 6. And this application is for a zoning map amendment from an R4 district with a C22 overlay to an R7A district with a C23 overlay, and a zoning text amendment to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area, which would facilitate a 9-story mixed residential and commercial building. Next slide, please. The proposed project site is located in Rego Park, which is located in central Queens. It's situated between Queens Boulevard and the Long Island Railroad mainline right-of-way at the intersection of 63rd Drive and Austin Street. The closest Long Island Railroad stop is the Forest Hill Station, which is located approximately 1 mile southeast of the site. The project area is located just south of the Rego Center Mall, which is a major shopping destination and draws a large number of shoppers from across the borough. And the 63rd Drive Rego Park subway station, which services the M and R subway lines, is located north of the project site as well. Next slide, please. The proposed project site is located in an R4 district with a C22 overlay, which is mapped in 1961. It's located on 63rd Drive, which is a wide major north-south commercial corridor in Rego Park, and is mostly comprised of low-density commercial with a handful of mid-rise multifamily buildings. And moving away from 63rd Drive, the area to the west is zoned R4 and is mostly characterized by low-density residential. Moving to the east, the neighborhood is zoned R71 and is mostly characterized by mid-rise multifamily residential. Next slide, please. And like most of 63rd Drive, this site formerly hosted a 1-story commercial building that consisted of a diner. The north side of this intersection hosts 2 supermarkets, and a branch of the Queens Public Library is located to the west. Immediately to the east of the project site is a 3-story multifamily building. And moving north and east, the neighborhood's largely characterized by 6 to 7-story multifamily buildings. And the southern boundary of the site is adjacent to the Long Island Railroad right-of-way. Next slide, please. The site was cleared in 2019 and is currently vacant, and photo 1 shows a site from the intersection of Austin Street and 63rd Drive. Photos 2 and 3 show the project site from 63rd Drive, with the supermarket in view in photo 3. Next slide, please. And as you can see, the surrounding streetscapes are characterized by a mixture of active ground floor retail along 63rd Drive and post-war multifamily buildings along the interior. Photo 4 is a view looking south on 63rd Drive with the proposed development site to the left. Photo 5 is a view looking east on Austin Street with the development site to the right of the photo. And photo 6 is a view looking north on 63rd Drive with the development site also to the right. Next slide, please. The proposed development would consist of a new 9-story mixed-use building with a maximum height of 95 feet. It would total approximately 68,656 square feet at an FAR of 5.0, with approximately 10,318 square feet of commercial use on the ground floor and approximately 58,338 square feet of residential use on floors 2 through 9. The applicant proposes to build approximately 74 new dwelling units and proposes to provide 24 permanently affordable units under MIH option 2 that would be reserved as heirs units. The building would rise to a height of 65 feet and set back 10 feet on 63rd Drive and 15 feet on Austin Street before rising to a maximum building height of 95 feet. And the building would provide 45 parking spaces in the cellar to be accessed by a new curb cut on Austin Street. Next slide, please. And here you can see in the proposed site plan that the entrances to both the commercial and residential uses would be located along the 63rd Drive frontage. And the parking spaces would be located within an attended parking garage located in the cellar of the building, accessible via a new 12-foot curb cut on Austin Street. And it would include 17 accessory residential spaces and 28 accessory commercial spaces. Next slide, please. And here is the ground floor site plan with roughly 10,000 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor. Next slide. To facilitate this development, the applicant proposes to rezone the property from an R4 district with a C22 overlay to an R7A district with a C23 overlay. And this would offer an increase to residential FAR and would slightly reduce parking requirements for most commercial uses, which more closely reflects the area's densities and the community's access to transit. Next slide, please. The application also includes a zoning text amendment to establish an MIH area, and the applicant proposes to map MIH options 1 and 2. And the AMI for this part of Community District 6 is roughly 63,000. Next slide, please. This slide and the preceding slide show illustrative drawings of the proposed development, and this one shows a view of the proposed development looking south on 63rd Drive. Next slide, please. And here we have a view of the proposed development looking northeast on 63rd Drive. Next slide, please. And finally, a view looking east. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions? Commissioner De La Ruz, followed by Commissioner Burney.
It would certainly be helpful to hear from the applicant team why they're proposing MIH option 2, given the AMI level in the immediate area that you outlined.
Sure. I can have them speak to that more. Sure, the Rego Park NTA defines the AMI for the area as 63,495, and just for some context, the Queens AMI is 64,987.
Right.
Commissioner Burney.
Thank you. Just with respect to the 10,000 square feet of commercial on the ground floor, that's a very large space, and one can imagine it would inevitably fall into the hands of a bank or a pharmacy that would be, you know, rather sort of not very conducive to street activity. Is there any way to have the retail space subdivided so that smaller individual retailers would be?
Sure. Yeah, the applicant actually said that the ground floor commercial space would likely be divided for local retail, likely having probably 2 tenants with the 2 entrances shown on the site plan. They can speak more to what they have in mind, but they have said that they're leaning more towards locally oriented commercial uses, such as the ones that are found on 63rd Drive, like small eating establishments, pharmacies, salons, and things like that.
Terrific. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes, thank you. This is, it's been a long time since we thought about heirs when we did the rezoning back when that category was created, and I'm chagrined to realize I don't remember how heirs is supposed to work. Are the rest of the units, the market rate units in this building, also going to be targeted for seniors?
No, those would just be market rate without just any
regular market rate.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Kathy, what percentage of the units are allotted to heir status occupants? Heirs status occupants?
It would be 24 out of the 74 units, which is pursuant to MIH option 2, 80%. Yeah.
All right. Further questions? This is certified.
Actually, I have a question.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, my raised hand's not working because of the way I was set up this morning.
Okay.
So
Commissioner Marin and then Commissioner De La Uz. Proceed.
So is the developer proposing that the entire MIH portion be dedicated to the heirs seniors apartment?
Yes.
Is that within HPD's lottery allowances?
They're not relying on any city subsidies for this.
Got it. Understood. Understood. Just the state air subsidy in this case.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner De La Uz.
Kind of following up on the whole heirs line of questioning, it would be helpful for the development team to, in addition to talking about their justification for option 2, it would be helpful specifically given their proposal for heirs, you know, how they arrived at their target AMI.
Thanks, Commissioner De La Uz, because that was on my mind as well, so thank you.
I'll make sure they're able to talk to that.
Further questions? If not, this is certified.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. The 5th item on the agenda is a certification of a zoning map and zoning text amendment in Queens Community District 2. Our presenter is Scott Solomon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As Jeff pulls that up, just get affirmation on my audio would be great.
We can hear you.
Fantastic. Jeff, if you could proceed to the next slide. Good afternoon. This is a private application by Phipps Houses seeking approval of a zoning map amendment and zoning text amendment to facilitate the development of a 7-story predominantly residential building consisting of approximately 167 income-restricted housing units and an approximately 5,300 square foot ground floor community facility space in the Sunnyside neighborhood of Queens Community District 2. Next slide. In 2016, the CPC approved another set of land use actions requested by the same applicant for the same project area. This included a rezoning from M11 to an MX district that included M11 and non-contextual R6 components, and additional text amendments that provided bulk relief in one of the first MIH designations, at the time mapping option 2. This was intended to facilitate a larger building envelope that would rise to a maximum height of 10 stories, include 220 affordable dwelling units up to a maximum income band at 130% AMI, later changed to 110% AMI post-certification, and would provide and propose a ground floor UPK, or Universal Pre-K facility. During City Council's review, the applicant withdrew their application. Next slide, please. Prior to CPC approval, opposition was primarily regarding a preference for deeper affordability levels in the range of 50 to 100% AMI levels, a reduction in the size and density of the building, primarily due to the high number of units, a removal of UPK replaced, preference to replace with a larger space for a local nonprofit, a need to provide additional parking spaces for both residents and local employees, improvements to the Barnett Avenue's substandard sidewalk, and residents in the Phipps Garden Apartments owned by the applicant across the street who had expressed concern about the maintenance of their property as this applicant was seeking land use actions. Next slide, please. The surrounding area is characterized by a mix of land uses, including residential, mostly south of Barnett, and a mix of light industrial, commercial, transportation uses to the north, west, and east of the project area. The project area's rear lot line is adjacent to Long Island Railroad right-of-way. Queens Boulevard is located 5 blocks to the south, and Northern Boulevard is located north of the rail right-of-way. Southwest of the project area is the Sunnyside Gardens Planned Community Preservation District, which contains the Sunnyside Gardens development, a planned community of 2-story attached townhouses, including a 3.5-acre private park. Immediately south of the project area are the Phipps Garden Apartments, again, a mix of 4 to 6-story apartment buildings, which along with the Preservation District make up the Sunnyside Gardens Historic District, designated by the LPC in 2007. Windmiller Park, a public park and playground, is located approximately 750 feet south of the project area. Additionally, residential uses located South Barnett Avenue and range between 1 and 2 family attached and semi-detached buildings to 12-story apartment towers further south. Next slide. The area is well served by public transit. The Northern Boulevard subway station with access to the E, M, and R lines, an approximately 10-minute walk away via Woodside Avenue, and the 52nd Street subway station at Queens Boulevard with access to the 7 line is approximately 9-minute walk away to the south. Several local bus routes serve the surrounding area, including along Northern Boulevard and Queens Boulevard corridors, and along 48th Street to the west, 58th Street to the east. Next slide, please. The project area is coterminous with the development site, fronts the north side of Barnett Avenue between 50th and 52nd Street, and has a lot area of approximately 64,366 square feet, with approximately 559 feet of frontage on Barnett Avenue and a maximum depth of 149 feet on the eastern end of the site and a minimum depth of 63 feet at the western end of the site. It is currently approved with a 223 space surface commercial parking lot. There is no existing curb or sidewalk treatment along the entirety of the street frontage, and the project area is within the M11 zoning district, which allows light industrial uses at a 1.0 FAR. Next slide, please. Following 6 photos are of the existing conditions. Photo 1 on the left is a view of the western end of the project site, fronting Barnett Avenue at 50th Street. Photo 2, view of the eastern end of the project site at 52nd Street. Next slide, please. Photo 3 is a view looking northeast from 52nd Street with the site in the background. On the right, photo 4, a view looking west from Barnett Avenue, side of the right, Phipps Garden Apartments on the left. Next slide, please. Photo 5 is a view of the Phipps Garden Apartments looking southwest from the site. And photo 6 is a view looking east from Barnett Avenue at 52nd Street. Next slide, please. In terms of the proposed development, applicants proposing a new 161,000 square foot, 7-story mixed use, predominantly residential building containing approximately 167 affordable dwelling units. 50 would be permanently pursuant to MIH option 1 and a 5,000 square foot ground floor community facility space. Although no parking spaces are required for income restricted units within a transit zone, due to the high parking demand from the community, 170 at-grade attended parking spaces would be provided. 59 would be dedicated to tenants. The other 111 would be made available to the public as permitted by zoning. Of the 167 units, 10% would be at 40% AMI, 20% 50% AMI, another 20% 60% AMI, 25% 90% AMI, and the balance at up to 110% AMI. Next slide. In addition to indoor recreational space, required recreational space pursuant to quality housing regulations include a 5,600 square foot outdoor space located on a 2nd-story terrace above the at-grade rear yard parking. A children's playground for tenant use is proposed for the western portion of the site. In addition to a brand new improved sidewalk condition, including new required street trees, 2 new curb cuts were proposed at the western and eastern ends of the site. The western curb cut would provide access and egress only at the eastern end. Proposed building has a base height of 59 feet, 65 feet is allowed. However, the design does utilize dormers, permitted obstruction, to facilitate the 7th floor with a roof height of 69 feet. Although the proposed building has a relatively long street wall of 447 feet, the building attempts to break up the facade with significant articulation. Setbacks range from 7.5 to 11 plus feet on the eastern and western ends, and between 29 and 35 feet on the central portion. Next slide, please. Maisonette apartments with access to private enclosed front yards are proposed on the eastern and central portion of the building. A deeper setback in the center includes the residential entrance, and a 5,000 square foot community facility space located in the western portion of the building. A tenant has not been identified, but the applicant would prefer a local nonprofit after the previous application that was withdrawn had included a UPK that was met with opposition. Next slide, please. 2nd floor consists of dwelling units and required laundry and recreational space. Additional space is provided for a kids' playroom, exercise room, lounge, and multi-purpose room. Next slide, please. Upper floors consist of additional dwelling units. Building is subject to HPD unit mix guidelines. As proposed, there are no studios, 88 one bedrooms, 62 two bedrooms, and 17 three bedrooms. Previously, the community expressed preference for a family-friendly mix, unit mix, requesting 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. Next slide. Above section, looking west, Barnett Avenue to the left, with a new improved sidewalk treatment, second floor terrace above the parking to the right. The roof tops out at 69 feet, 10 feet floor to floor heights on the upper floors, 12 feet, 8-inch floor to floor heights on the ground floor. Portion of the second floor in the front portion of the building accommodated with dormers, which is why the 7th floor penetrates the 65-foot maximum base height. Next slide. Above elevations, again, very long street frontage along Barnett Avenue, which is why the design attempts to break up the facade with significant articulation. Fronting Barnett Avenue above, looking north, below, looking south into the rear of the building. Next slide, please. Above is an unaltered photo of Barnett Avenue looking east. Next slide, please. This is a same photo with the rendering added on. Next slide, please. In order to facilitate the proposed building, applicant is requesting a zoning map amendment from M11 to R6A. The R6A districts and MIH areas allow a residential FAR of 3.6 and 3.0 for community facility uses. Related text amendment is also proposed to designate the area an MIH area. Applicant proposes to map option 1, consistent with other recently approved MIH mappings in the area, or CB2. Pursuant to option 1, 25% residential floor area must be affordable housing units for residents with incomes averaging 60% AMI, or 46,000 for a family of 3, including at least 10% to be affordable at 40% AMI, or 31,000 for a family of 3. This would require approximately 50 of the 167 units to be permanently affordable. However, the applicant is proposing 100% affordability and also proposing AMI levels beyond the minimum requirements of option 1. Per the applicant, the rationale for the proposed rezoning is to facilitate the production of additional affordable housing on an underutilized site, consistent with the city's objectives for promoting housing production and affordability as outlined in Housing New York. The 100% affordable building would reflect the predominantly residential character of the surrounding area. And per the applicant, the density would be appropriate given the proximity to public transit. Next slide, please. Just a brief comparison to the current proposal to the previous. Deeper affordability bands proposed a reduction from 10 floors to 7 floors and 220 units to 167 dwelling units. Larger community facility space on the first floor is proposed. Applicant, again, not looking to add a UPK facility. Although the unit count has decreased, proposed parking has been increased to 170, adding a completely new sidewalk treatment. And since 2016, the applicant notes that they have invested over $3 million in improvements to the Phipps Sunnyside Garden apartments across the street. Next slide, please. And that's a conclusion. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Commissioner De La Hoz.
Hi, Scott. I'm glad to see this come back, especially after how it was pulled last time. I'm just wondering, it'd be great for Phipps to talk a little bit more about the increase in parking from the last proposal to this proposal. And I guess it'd be helpful to understand, like, who is currently using that parking lot, and then who do they envision using it in the future? And then, you know, what their sources of financing are for the affordable housing. It'd be helpful to understand that as well.
Sure, absolutely. Let them expand. I can tell you that you know, it's been a few years, but at the time, a few employees in the neighborhood, specifically the Steve Madden office down the street, had showed up in droves, expressing opposition to it based on their use of the site for the parking. And they will be using
Does Steve Madden provide any parking for their employees?
Pardon me?
Does Steve Madden provide any parking for their employees?
I am not aware of. They may or may not. I'll ask, I could ask the applicant to find out. And regarding the financing, not again, but I believe they're using the mix and match program, HPD and HDC.
So it's okay. That's what I thought, but I just wanted that confirmed. They seem to be going at lower AMIs than even what that's allows. So
Yeah, no, they're going below. Yeah.
Are you done, Michelle?
the only other question I had real quick was, thank you, sorry, was just if they could help outline the engagement process. It was helpful to have the side-by-side of kind of like, you know, how the proposal has changed from last time, but it'd also be helpful to get a sense of like, what was the engagement process, especially with those that expressed concerns before. And, you know, should we expect for them to be satisfied with this or still concerned?
Sure, absolutely.
Commissioner Burney.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I wasn't around when this came up the first time, I suppose. So I'm curious to know if they've fared better with the community with this revised proposal, and what was the objection to universal pre-K? And thirdly, isn't it unusual to provide like 170 parking spaces in a development that's actually pretty close to public transit?
Yeah, it's within a transit zone, so they would not have to provide any parking spaces. But the applicant understands that this community has expressed a preference for parking. So they're trying to meet the demands previously in 2016 and currently. There's still a demand in this neighborhood. Regarding your first point was why they against the UPK. I think there were some concerns about traffic generated in the mornings. So some pretty anecdotal concerns about that at the time. But they've listened to them loud and clear. They're not proposing any UPK there.
Has it fared better now with the community? The community's happier?
We're going to find out.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to find out. Yeah. Okay.
But they have engaged CB2 already, project certification presentation.
Yeah.
So they're looking forward to that engagement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Further questions?
Question.
Good for them for trying again.
Question.
Commissioner Marin.
Sorry, but again, my raised hand's not working.
I see you. I see you, Commissioner.
Okay.
Marin.
There you go. So Scott, some of the questions I was going to ask already were asked, which was, you know, side-by-side comparison, the number of parking spaces. But I also wanted to take a look at the site plan because it seems like this building does span 2 blocks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
and
Jeff, you could go to slide, at least to start off, slide 12. And as he's pulling that, so yes, it stretches along Barnett between 50th and 52nd Street. And Correct. It's the width of the current Phipps apartments across the street.
Oh, so it does follow the same width of the apartments. That's what I'm trying to get at, because it does appear to be such a large swath of frontage, of facade, that may have been better broken off instead of, you know, just some of the rustication of the facade itself, but maybe some view corridors across. It's just one huge building.
Yeah.
And I was comparing it to the buildings across the street. So if you can show the side plan with the buildings, I guess, so you're saying, I see, this whole tree-lined street is the building across the street, and we're sort of mimicking that whole frontage.
Yeah, and I'll certainly ask the applicant to some additional renderings from the street view that gives a better view of the articulation. Because when you're looking at it just from 50th Street looking east, it does appear like just a street wall, but there is significant articulation, especially in the center. Whereas the Phipps Apartment Gardens as well, the older building has articulation, even less so, and it has essentially the same street wall as the proposed building.
And I guess my last question, because I know we're asking about parking, so we might as well ask the question.
Yeah.
What was the parking here used? Who used the parking here previously?
So, I mean, so it's currently still operated as a commercial parking lot.
Got it.
There's local employees in the area, residents in the area. Those who had showed up to the community board happen to be some local offices in the area, in addition to residents. And
so is it envisioned that this parking will be used by outside of the members of the community as well? Is that what this is envisioned to be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to presume where the employees do work, but they are, 111 spaces are proposed to be used for non-residents of the building.
Got it. So it's intentional. It was an intentional discussion with the community based on, if you put these people on the street, you're going to take away my off-street parking. It's basically what the issue is, and that's understandable.
Absolutely.
But just understanding it to get all together would be great. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome, sir.
Commissioner Rampershad.
Yes, actually, Commissioner Marin asked the question I was going to ask, and that was with regards to the parking. I know this area very well. I know parking can be tough. I guess my only question would be, will the applicant be overseeing the parking for this 111 spaces, or would they be hiring an outside entity to handle that?
I'll pass that on to the applicant. I'm not aware of who the operator would be.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Okay, there being none, this is certified.
Thank you.
Okay, the sixth item on the agenda is a certification of a zoning map amendment in Queens Community District 13. Scott will be presenting this as well.
Thank you, Jeff. If you could just proceed to the next slide. Oh, great. All right. Good afternoon again, commissioners. So this is a private application by Marina Plaza 6312 LLC for a zoning map amendment, changing a C13 commercial overlay to a C23 within an unchanged R4 district to permit additional uses and allow the applicant to seek a BSA special permit to continue operation of a physical, cultural, or health establishment, or PCE, at 24501 Jamaica Avenue in the Belrose neighborhood of Queens Community District 13. Next slide, please. The project area is located on the north side of Jamaica Avenue between 245th and 246th Street. The center line of Jamaica Avenue, also known as Jericho Turnpike, serves as the border between Queens and Nassau County. The south side of Jamaica Avenue is within an unincorporated portion of the town of Hempstead, likewise known as Belrose. The surrounding area is characterized by low-density commercial and mixed-use buildings along Jamaica Avenue, a 4-lane arterial and major corridor, commercial corridor for the community. Low-density 1- and 2-family homes front the side streets to the north and south of Jamaica Avenue. Approximately 500 feet to the west of the project area is the Cross Island Parkway. The surrounding area contains mostly low-density zoning districts, including R32, R3A, and R2A districts. Project area is within an R4 C13 district, and 4 blocks east of the project area, just beyond the boundaries of the map above, is an R4 C23 district. In 2013, as part of the DCP-sponsored Belrose Floral Park Glen Oaks rezoning, the project area was rezoned from R4 C22 to R4 C13. In an effort to prevent commercial uses from encroaching onto residential side streets, the depth of the overlay was decreased from 150 feet to 80 feet, the depth of the existing zoning lot. The C23 overlay map 4 blocks east of the project area was also established at the time. And in mapping the C13 and C23 districts, the CPC noted that these overlays would support existing retail and services as well as additional commercial opportunities. A PCE is allowed in a C23 district subject approval of the BSA special permit. However, this is not an allowed use in a C13. Surrounding area is characterized as a suburban neighborhood with high auto-oriented commuting patterns. However, the area is served by public transit, including both New York City Transit and NASA Intercounty Express bus routes along Jamaica Avenue. And the Belrose Long Island Railroad Station is approximately 10-minute walk away to the southeast. Next slide, please. Project area consists of the majority of block 8659, lot 1, a 15,000 square foot trapezoidal lot. A 500 square foot sliver of the northwest portion of lot 1 would remain outside of the rezoning area. Next slide. The entire block contains a development site, currently improved with a 1-story, 15,000 square foot commercial building built in 1932. The building, owned by the applicant, is divided into 7 commercial units, including 2 PCEs, one a traditional fitness center, the other a youth-oriented martial arts studio, physical therapy office, a beauty salon, and 3 eating and drinking establishments. I just want to check that actually. So one of the traditional fitness center, and when the past few months, we're notified the applicant actually has closed for business. was operating pursuant a variance, not a special permit. Unfortunately, applicant described this closure due to pandemic-related restrictions. The variance has no terms and on date, and has no terms as far as conditions on the operator, which would allow any other PC to operate within the next 2 years without having to seek another variance or seek a special permit. Subsequent 2013 rezoning, the existing martial arts studio was opened by a tenant of the applicant who was unaware of the zoning nonconformance. Next slide, please. Above photo 1 is a view of the development site facing northeast from the intersection of Jamaica Avenue and 245th Street. The storefront with the yellow signage is the PC that was previously operated as and known as Body of Fitness, a traditional fitness center. Photo 2 is a view of the development site facing northwest from the intersection of Jamaica Avenue and 246th Street. In the foreground is the existing martial arts studio, currently in non-conforming use, an illegal non-conforming use. Next slide, please. Photo 3 is view of 246th Street facing southeast from the development site. Photo 4, of note, across the street, Nassau County, there is a martial arts studio there. Photo 4, a view of Jamaica Avenue facing southwest from 246th Street. Development site at the right. Applicant is not proposing any additional development, no additional square footage or any change of current uses. Next slide, please. Applicant is requesting the zoning map amendment from C13 to C23, keeping the R4 district. This would allow the current martial arts studio to subsequently seek the PCE special permit at the Board of Standards and Appeals. There would be no change in the bulk regulations compared to the C13, but permitted uses are more expansive beyond just the use of a PC. Overlays within 1,000 feet of a limited access highway, including this overlay, permit transient hotels. Hotel development is possible. There are 2 examples of hotels to the east along Jamaica Avenue. But for the applicant, due to the relatively small 15,000 square foot lot, the requirement to include at least 8 feet of open area due to its adjacency to the residential district to the north, and required parking and loading requirements, applicant believes is less likely for a transient hotel to be developed here. Additionally, this would permit wider range of local service uses and home maintenance establishments, as well as local businesses and entertainment uses in use groups 7, 8, 9, and 14. Next slide. The applicant views the mapping of the C23 district map 4 blocks to the east as appropriate, given the role of Jamaica Avenue as a commercial corridor. Additionally, the additional flexibility of the uses will continue to support the goal of supporting additional commercial uses, a sought after but not realized objective of the 2013 rezoning. Applicant believes the change in zoning to be appropriate to help enforce and promote commercial opportunities that the current C13, as the applicant believes, is not supporting. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? If there are no questions, then this is certified.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Having some technical difficulties, but here I'm back. The 7th item on the agenda is a certification of a city map amendment in Queens Community District 4, and Philip Montgomery is our presenter.
Hello and good afternoon, commissioners. Jeff, next slide, please. So this is an application by the New York City School Construction Authority seeking an amendment to the city map. The proposed amendment involves the narrowing of the mapped width of 44th Avenue between Junction Boulevard and National Street in Queens Community District 4. The proposed amendment is a follow-up corrective action as 2 schools in School District 24 that were built in 2015 and 2016 are partially built in a mapped but unbuilt portion of 44th Avenue. The proposed amendment would also remove the encumbrance caused by the mapped street over 7 private property owners. Next slide, please. The project site is located in an M11 zoning district, approximately 6 blocks south of the MTA 7 line and just north of the Long Island Railroad. Zoning classifications within a quarter-mile radius of the project site consist mostly of moderate density residential districts, including R5 and R6B districts. Next slide, please. Construction of the schools was intended to address the need for additional public school capacity in the area as identified in the Department of Education's 5-year capital plan for fiscal years 2010 to 2014. According to the plan, almost 5,000 additional seats at the primary and intermediate level were needed in the school district. And also need to note that schools are not permitted in M11 zoning districts, and the SCA received mayoral overrides for use in bulk for the 2 school sites in 2013. Next slide, please. So PS 315, the Tiffany School, is a 1,005-seat elementary school. It occupies a 55,000 square foot rectangular lot that has frontage on 44th Avenue, and 97th Place. The school contains approximately 131,000 square feet, has 5 stories, and is 71 feet tall. It opened in the fall of 2015. IS 311, the Corona Arts and Science Academy, is an 870-seat intermediate school. It occupies a 40,000 square foot L-shaped lot that has frontage on 43rd and 44th Avenues. The school building contains approximately 100,000 square feet, has 5 stories, and is 77 feet in height. It opened in the fall of 2016. The subject portion of 44th Avenue is mapped to a width of 45 feet. It is currently built with an 18-foot wide travelway, a 10-foot sidewalk on the north, and no sidewalk on the south, which abuts, and there's also parking on the north. And there's no sidewalk on the south, which abuts a retaining wall for the Long Island Railroad. The street is open to one-way westbound traffic. The 45-foot map dimension would be narrowed to 30 feet. The area to be narrowed comprises approximately 15,300 square feet and is under the ownership of both the city and adjacent property owners and would remain in such ownership. As a result of the school construction, there were no changes to the existing travelway, and the existing sidewalk on the north side of 44th Avenue was widened from the old 5-foot width to the current 10-foot width. Next slide, please. So this is a view looking west on 44th Avenue. IS 311 is on the right, and you can see the retaining wall for the Long Island Railroad on the left. Next slide, please. This is another picture of IS 311. Next slide, please. This is looking back east on 44th Avenue between the 2 schools. Next slide, please. This is PS 315. Next slide, please. Looking west on 44th Avenue towards Junction Boulevard from PS 315. Next slide, please. And this is looking back east on 44th Avenue from Junction Boulevard. This concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Levin? Maybe.
Are you here? Are you hearing me?
Yes, now I am.
Okay. Thank you, Philip. I'm just curious. I noticed on the briefing sheet that the application was filed in 2013, presumably when the schools were starting to be under construction, and the map was received in 2015. So why has it taken so long to get to this point?
Yes, so the applicant, they initially came to the City Planning Commission back in 2012, and they had, intended to have, this map change in place. There were various delays, and also, the SCA is not subject to normal regulations like per DOB and others. So they wouldn't have to have this city map change in place to construct the schools. And then there were just various other delays. I guess construction got underway. It became a priority was no longer a priority and just kind of went away and then finally came back.
Finally, you got tired of having it sit on your desk and decided we got to deal with this thing?
Well, I think both agencies got tired of it sitting on our desks, so.
Yeah. Okay, good, thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Burney.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. I'm just trying to understand, looking at this image on slide 11, what exactly is going to happen then? Are they going to widen the sidewalk? Is that the idea?
No, they're not going. That's the sidewalks along the private property owners that I mentioned. To my knowledge, the sidewalks were only widened in front of the schools. So, but there was no plan to widen the sidewalks along the entire length of the demapped area.
So why is it being demapped?
For uniformity, because also removing that mapped portion would remove the encumbrance that if those private property owners wanted to, redevelop their property in the future, they could do so as of right, but they couldn't if it was still in the bed of the mapped street. So it made sense for us to remove that encumbrance from those property owners over the long block section.
I'm still not really understanding what you mean. I mean, physically, are there any changes proposed to what we're looking at on slide 11?
No, there are no changes at all.
No, this is just a case.
We could go back a few slides to the school slides, and you can see that those sidewalks were widened.
Yeah.
Even back one slide. Yeah, yes, you see
right.
the wide width of those sidewalks. Those sidewalks were initially only 5 feet wide. And
okay. So I don't mean to hold everybody up just because I don't understand it, but I don't really understand.
Right, so no, but it's just a case of having the city map match reality on the ground.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's essentially what it is.
Oh,
yeah.
I see. Okay, I get it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? If there are no further questions, this is certified.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Moving on to the 8th item on our agenda. It's a certification of a disposition of city-owned property in Brooklyn Community District 2. Our presenter is Joshua Vogel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. Next slide, please. This is an application by the Department for Citywide Administrative Services for a disposition of non-residential city-owned property to facilitate the development of commercial office space in a mixed-use building in the Dumbo neighborhood, Brooklyn Community District 2. Next slide. The project is located at 69 Adams Street in Dumbo, Brooklyn. The neighborhood is roughly bordered by the East River to the north, the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway to the south, Vinegar Hill to the east, and the Brooklyn Bridge and Fulton Ferry to the west. The Manhattan Bridge bisects the neighborhood. The surrounding area contains a mix of medium and high density residential, retail, office, industrial, and community facility uses, as well as a variety of transit-related infrastructure. Dumbo is part of the Brooklyn Tech Triangle, established in 2012 to encourage creative, technology, and design firms to locate their offices in downtown Brooklyn, Dumbo, and the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Next slide, please. The project area is located on the block bounded by Front Street to the north, Adams Street to the west, York Street to the south, and Pearl Street to the east. The Manhattan Bridge runs over the eastern portion of the lot. 2 blocks west of the project area are residential and mixed-use buildings ranging from 4 to 13 stories. A 21 mixed-use residential and commercial building is currently under construction 2 blocks east of the project area. The surrounding area also has a number of medium-scale office buildings ranging between 9 to 12 stories in height. Front and Washington Streets are the main commercial corridors in the neighborhood, with local ground floor retail in commercial and mixed-use loft buildings. 4 blocks to the west of the project area is Empire Stores, an adaptive reuse of the historic waterfront coffee warehouses. that feature a marketplace, food hall, restaurants, and an art gallery. Brooklyn Flea, an outdoor market, operates a block north of the project area, around the anchorage of the Manhattan Bridge. Most of the surrounding area is within the state and national register listed Dumbo Industrial District and the Landmark Preservation Commission designated Dumbo Historic District, established in 2000 and 2007 respectively. The 85-acre Brooklyn Bridge Park is located 2 blocks north and west of the project area. There are 3 other parks within a 2-block radius: Clumber Corner, Bar and Grill, and Bridge Park. The York subway station provides access to the F train 1 block southeast of the project area at the corner of York Street and J Street. The High Street station provides access to the A and C trains 4 blocks to the south. The area is served by the B25 bus, which connects the Fulton Ferry and Broadway Junction, and the B67 bus, which connects the Brooklyn Navy Yard to Kensington. In addition, there are 3 city bike stations within 1 block of the project area. Next slide, please. The project area is within a larger special mixed-use district that includes blocks to the west, north, and east. Within this MX district are pairings of M1 districts and residential districts that allow for a range of residential uses, community facility uses, and commercial and industrial uses at varying densities. The block where the project area is located, along with the block to the east, were rezoned in 2002 as part of the Light Bridges rezoning, which rezoned an M1-2 district to an M1-5 R9-1 district. M1-5 districts permit commercial and industrial uses up to a maximum FAR of 5. R9-1 districts permit residential and community facility uses up to a maximum FAR of 9. There's a maximum base height of 90 and a maximum building height of 280 feet. An M16 district is located directly south of the project area, which allows commercial and industrial uses up to a maximum FAR of 10. Next slide, please. So here's a closer look of the project area, which is located on block 52 and outlined in red. Lots 15 and 17, seen in yellow in the hatched pattern, are 2 city-owned lots located on the northeast corner of the block with a total lot area of approximately 28,000 square feet. These lots are currently operated by the Department of Transportation for open storage and parking and are directly under the Manhattan Bridge. Lot 4, seen in blue, is 17,463 square feet and privately owned. The lot is currently vacant. The project area consists of these 3 lots, the 2 city-owned lots and lot 4. The proposed action would combine the city-owned property and the development site into a single zoning lot that would facilitate the use of development rights from the 2 city-owned lots on the privately owned lot. Also on this block, on the southwest corner, is lot 7501, which is a 23-story residential building. It was constructed in 2006 and it's not part of this proposed project area. Next slide, please. In 2017, the New York City Economic Development Corporation issued an RFP seeking a purchaser for a portion of the unused city-owned development rights on lots 15 and 17 for the purpose of creating commercial office space. The owner of adjacent lot 4 was selected pursuant to the RFP and intends to purchase 98,446 square feet of floor area from the city-owned tax lots. This floor area will be restricted to commercial office space. The public purpose of the proposed action is to facilitate commercial office space development and create outer borough jobs per the goals of the 2017 New York Works Plan, which seeks to bring jobs closer to where people work, connecting New Yorkers of all neighborhoods with economic opportunity. Next slide, please. Now, before I discuss the specific development these actions will facilitate, I'm sharing some photos to provide context. So this first photo, looking north from York Street, shows the city-owned DOT lots that are used for open storage and vehicle parking. Above on the right is the Manhattan Bridge, and on the left is the 23-story residential building, which is not part of the proposed project area. Next slide. This photo looking south on Front Street shows the entrance to the city-owned DOT lots under the Manhattan Bridge, outlined in yellow. And these are lots 15 and 17. Next slide. This photo looks northeast towards the Manhattan Bridge. The lot seen in the foreground is the vacant Lot 4, the development site. Next slide, please. This disposition action would facilitate the development of the 98,446 square feet of commercial office space on floors 3 through 9. This floor area generated from the city-owned tax lots is restricted to commercial office space. Excuse me, I just said a sentence too quick, so backing up a second. The proposed development is a 25-story, 284-foot tall building. The commercial base on floors 1 through 9 is comprised of retail, parking, and commercial office space. The upper floors are residential and would contain approximately 225 as-of-right units. Next slide, please. So now we're focusing on the yellow outlined commercial base, which this disposition will facilitate. And that's the 98,446 square feet of commercial office space seen on floors 3 through 9. This floor area generated from the 2 city-owned lots is restricted to commercial office space. This restriction will be memorialized in the zoning lot development agreement. In addition to creating commercial office space in the base of the building, the transfer of development rights helps to lift the as-of-right residential above the bridge, providing access to light and air. Next slide, please. Also, as part of this disposition, to ensure the residential units facing the bridge have access to light and air, a 30-foot wide permanent easement is proposed beginning at the 12th floor, the first residential floor. Next slide, please. In summary, the Department of Citywide Administrative Services is requesting the disposition of 98,446 square feet of zoning floor area to facilitate the creation of commercial office space in the Dumbo neighborhood of Brooklyn, Community District 2. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner De La Hoz.
You didn't include any talk of affordable housing in the disposition. Did EDC not include that in their RFP?
Correct. EDC did not include any affordable housing in the RFP. EDC focused the RFP on pursuing the city's goals for long-term growth in outer boroughs and making long-term investments in the city's future. And they can speak more towards why they chose not to include affordable housing in the hearing.
Yeah, it seems like a fatal flaw.
Right. One thing is that the site right next to Manhattan Bridge would not create ideal affordable units. It's low, create low quality housing under the bridge in a shadow with the loud noise from the train and cars because they would be on the base that's now commercial.
You can't use that argument and then have any residential. You either include the affordable with residential or you don't use that argument.
They will be obviously at the hearing on Wednesday.
Just so they get a preview of the critique.
Just also to clarify, this is for certification, and so this will go to the community board. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, well, I think you're gonna hear some of the same questions when it goes to the community board.
Yeah. Commissioner Dweck.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to concur with Commissioner De La Hoz. For me, it's a non-starter without any affordable component on it. So I just wanted to make that clear as it goes through the process.
Right. As was mentioned, the residential is as of right, but
But on city-owned land,
Right.
It's
part of the disposition of right.
Yeah.
Right.
The development site is privately owned, but yeah, the square feet being transferred is from city-owned land. And they could build an as-of-right all residential building that could potentially be the same height if this floor area wasn't transferred. But by doing this, it's facilitating the commercial office space.
Correct. So I'd like to see an affordable component.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll let it go through the process, but that's just my first glance at it.
I see Commissioner Burney. Commissioner Marin, did you have a question before?
I did, but the questions were asked. But I also want to reemphasize that this is a transfer of city property, basically city development rights. And if we're looking to get more units, affordable units, I don't understand. I understand that the transfer is for the intention of office space. But the argument, and I happen to agree with Commissioner De La Hoz, the argument of, you know, the affordable units would be in dark shadow, they're not anymore, because now we're raising the building to allow for that residential to get light and air. That was the argument that was made earlier. So I think that a consideration really seriously needs to be made about the affordable housing piece. I know we're at certification and we're going to hear from the community, but I think it's also important for us, for the developer to hear how the commissioners also feel.
Noted.
Got it. Commissioner Burney.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to know, do we know what's going to happen to lot 15 and 17 that's currently used by DOT for parking all the junk down there?
So the actions won't affect DOT's operations. They'll continue the lots today as parking and storage, and we have not heard any plans to change that.
Well, that's very disappointing because it's really a blight on the street down in that area, what they've done with that lot. So we should encourage them to try and improve it in some way.
Duly noted. Further questions? If not, this is certified.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the Brooklyn non-ULURP post referrals. The 9th item on our agenda is a non-ULURP post referral review of a modification of a previously approved authorization in Brooklyn Community District 12. Our presenter is Karina.
Good afternoon, commissioners. You can go to the next slide. As a reminder, this application is located in Brooklyn Community District 12, and the modifications would facilitate approximately 6,500 square feet of infill development that would support pediatric emergency facilities and circulation. Next slide. Next slide, please. Oh, can you go back one? Looks like it skipped ahead. Thank you. The proposed additions would all be located in the same general area of the Maimonides campus on the west side of 10th Avenue between 48th and 49th Streets. At locations A, B, and C, there would be one-story additions at the ground level that directly serve the pediatric emergency department. And then at location D, the applicant's proposing an infill expansion on floors 3 through 5. And lastly, at location E, there would be an addition for mechanical space on top of a 5-story building. Next slide. The proposed additions would, the proposed developments would comply with all other zoning regulations and would not require any further authorizations. As you can see on the table, both parcel F, where the additions are located, and the entire large-scale development would remain in compliance with permitted floor area and lot coverage with the proposed modifications. Next slide. This application was referred to the Community Board for 45 days on August 4th. The Community Board submitted a letter of support on September 18th, and you can find that in your briefing packages. The applicant also provided a letter in response to the Commission's question and referral about community engagement. This can be found in your briefing package as well. In their letter, the applicant describes that in addition to their engagement with the Community Board prior to referral, the applicant also discussed the proposed additions in April of last year with their Council of Community Organizations. That concludes my presentation. I'll now take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commission? So the determination proposed is to send an approval letter to the buildings department. All of those in favor of sending an approval letter to the Department of Buildings from DCP, please say yay.
Yay.
Yay. Any opposed? Thank you. The ayes have it.
Okay, the 10th item on the agenda is a non-ULURP post-referral review of authorizations and a restrictive deck. Our presenter is Syed Ahmed.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This application was referred out to Community Board 1 on August 17 for 45 days and was approved by the Community Board. The proposed actions include an authorization to modify the width of the shore public walkway and the waterfront yard, another authorization to modify the screening and planting area requirements in the WPAA, and a chair certification pursuant to Section 62.811. Next slide. The site is located south of the Williamsburg Bridge in Community District 1, Brooklyn. Next slide. The site was developed with 2 residential buildings on each side of required visual corridor and an upland connection. Next slide. The 2 residential towers contain 857 units, of which 187 are affordable. 33 of 187 affordable units are set aside for homeless individuals and families. The development also provides 31,583 square feet of waterfront public access areas, which is 6,621 square feet more than the zoning requires. Next slide. During the construction, this is the waterfront esplanade. During the construction of this esplanade, the applicant was advised by New York State DEC to cap the old deteriorating bulkhead by a new one, which was built beyond applicant's property onto land under the jurisdiction of Small Business Services. Then the new location of the bulkhead shifted the shore public walkway built on it outwards. Next slide. The new location of the bulkhead shifted the shore public walkway outward, shown here in thick purple line. This outward extension of the shore public walkway added approximately 1,000 square feet of land, which is beyond the applicant's property and is labeled as off-site public access area. The applicant has agreed to maintain and assume liability for this part of the PAA. Next slide. Next slide. The new location of the bulkhead also caused an inward shift in the shore public walkway at the Wetland Cove on applicant's property, which resulted in a 14-inch reduction of the 40 feet required width of the shore public walkway and waterfront yard. The reduced width of the shore public walkway is shown here by blue line on the right side of this slide. The department believes that the changes in the location and width of the shore public walkway were beyond the control of the applicant and were caused by their compliance with DEC approved plans. Next slide. Next slide. Since the opening of this shore public walkway, the lawn area shown here has been used as dog run, which posed maintenance issues for the owners and inconvenience for the users. Next slide. To discourage dog walking on the lawn area, the applicant is proposing to convert a portion of the lawn area shown here in green from grass to user-friendly gravel with additional seating. The proposed gravel area also serves as a path for emergency and service vehicles onto shore public walkway. Next slide. To address the unanticipated reduction in the required width of the shore public walkway and the waterfront yard, the applicant requests an authorization pursuant to Section 62.822A2, requesting to modify the required width of the shore public walkway and the waterfront yard from 40 feet to 38 feet 10 inches at the Wetland Cove. Next slide. The applicant also requests an authorization pursuant to Section 62.822B, requesting modification in the screening and planted area requirements in the WPAA. The deficiencies in the screening and planted area requirements were a result of the shifted location of the shore public walkway, conversion of lawn area from grass to gravel, minor design changes in the transition area requested by FDNY, and the designation of private open spaces into public access areas. Next slide. In addition to 2 authorizations, the applicant is requesting a certification pursuant to section 62811B, certifying that a site plan has been submitted showing compliance with the provisions of section 6250 and 6260 as modified through the authorizations proposed above. The applicant will also amend the restrictive declaration to substitute the site plans proposed herewith and require the applicant to maintain the off-site PAA on SPS property in accordance with the same terms and conditions inclusive of maintenance, repair, insurance, and indemnity provisions. Next slide. Community Board 1 submitted the recommendations approving this application by a vote of 23 in favor, 6 in opposition, and 1 abstention. In their recommendation, Community Board expressed a desire to be informed in a timely manner of changes the city and state agencies seek to alter the plans previously approved by the Community Board. In conclusion, the proposed authorizations and waterfront certification would allow the applicant to remedy the outstanding non-compliances within their built WPAA, as well as make minor operational changes to improve the functionality of their waterfront esplanade. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Syed. Questions? If there are no questions, then this will be skipped.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Manin.
Yes, Syed, can you go to slide 10 for a second?
Sure.
So part of the argument was that this area is used as a dog run, and hence the condition of the lawn.
Yes.
And I understand that, yes, dry grass, if not maintained, will be trampled and ripped up by dogs immediately, or anybody walking on that surface. If you look beyond the picture here, all the way to the back, that whole line of shrubbery is just dead. It appears that this property just wasn't irrigated properly during the process, and everything has died. And now we're reverting to making the whole thing a dog run, which is fine and admirable, but it just takes the greenery out of this whole open space. I would argue that maybe it's just a maintenance issue, but again, it's just a comment and opinion.
We have received similar complaints from other waterfront properties along the East River, and maybe when this picture was taken, it was summer, but you know, your concern is noted. Originally, yes.
Yes.
So yeah, if I may, this is Winston, Commissioner.
Yes.
Winston Von Engel from the Brooklyn office. They have since fenced off that area, and they actually replanted the grass and protected it from pets.
Okay.
And I believe, Sayed, the proposal is to make it gravel, not to turn it into a dog run, but to make it more resistive to pets using that area. And as Sayed said, there are other developments along the Brooklyn waterfront that have similar issues with pets, and you're right, maintenance is a concern in those areas.
But if we start taking away all the green, we're not going to have any green, and then we're going to have waterfront that's all gravel. I'm just concerned about this because this just changes the whole feeling of the development for folks who are living there. You know, it just changes everything. So, you know, just a point of consideration, and maybe just a smaller area of gravel for a dog run would be more beneficial. I don't know. It's just something to think about.
Point well taken.
Thank you.
Further questions on this matter? If not, this will be scheduled for a vote.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to pre-hearing items in Brooklyn. The 11th item on the agenda is a pre-hearing review of the zoning map amendment in Brooklyn Community District 1. Our presenter is Lilia Carrier.
Good afternoon. You can go to the next slide. So this is an application by 223 Troutman for a zoning map amendment to map a C24 commercial overlay over an existing R6B district in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. The proposed project area was included in the 2008 Grand Street rezoning, which changed the district from an R6 to an R6B and the commercial overlay along Grand Street from a C23 to a C24. Go to the next slide. The project area is located at 276 Bedford Avenue in Williamsburg, Community District 1 in Brooklyn. Next slide, please. The project area is a portion of a tax block generally bounded by Bedford Ave to the east, Berry Street to the west, North First Street to the north, and Grand Street to the south. The surrounding area is characterized by low and mid-density buildings with a mix of residential and commercial uses. The project area fronts on to Bedford Avenue, which is a neighborhood corridor with ground floor commercial retail. The surrounding mid-blocks are predominantly row homes and multifamily apartment buildings. The immediate surrounding area is zoned R6B, and the Greenpoint Williamsburg Upland Inclusionary Housing Designated Area encompasses much of the surrounding area. The C24 commercial overlay is mapped along Grand Street and Bedford Ave south of the project area. Zoning districts just north of the project area include a mid-density R6A contextual district and a paired M12 and R6A special mixed-use district. Next slide, please. Nearby public facilities include the Monsignor Alexis Jakar Hall, an affordable senior housing facility, Our Lady of Consolation Church, and the New York City Parks Metropolitan Recreation Center. The project area is located in a transit zone and well served by public transportation. The Bedford Ave L train station is 6 blocks north of the project area. The project area is also served by the B62, which runs along Bedford Avenue, the B59, which runs along Grand Street, and City Bike, which is there's a station 1 block north on the northeast corner of Bedford Avenue and Metropolitan Avenue. Next slide, please. The project area is located on block 2380 at the southwest corner of Bedford Avenue and North First. It is approximately 2,500 square feet with a 100 frontage along North First Street and 25 feet along Bedford Avenue. Included in the project area is the development site and a portion of the adjacent lot, which is a condo building with 5 stories, 8 units, and was completed in 2014. The project area is located within R6B district and partially within a C24 commercial overlay district. Next slide. So the development site is approximately 2,700 square feet. It's a vacant corner lot. Next slide. You can go to the next slide. Okay, there we go. The applicant proposes to construct a 3-story mixed-use building. Sorry, 1 back, 8. So the applicant proposes to construct a 3-story mixed-use building on the development site at a height of 39 feet. The proposed development will be a full lot coverage building with a total of approximately 5,500 square feet with 2,300 square feet of ground floor commercial use and 3,200 square feet of residential floor area between 2 units on the upper 2 floors. Next slide. So the applicant is seeking a zoning map amendment to establish a C24 commercial overlay over an existing R6B zoning district. The zoning map amendment is necessary to facilitate the development of a new mixed-use building on the development site and fully establish the C24 commercial overlay along Bedford Avenue. Next slide, please. So the existing overlay is mapped 100 feet from Grand Street, but due to the irregular shape of the block, it does not cover the northern portion of Bedford Avenue. The proposed map amendment will map the C24 overlay 100 feet from Bedford Avenue and thereby extending the overlay over the remaining portion of Bedford Ave. Next slide. So on June 24th, the Community Board voted to approve the application with 27 in favor, 2 opposed, and none abstaining. On June 3rd, the borough president had a hearing and voted to approve with conditions. The conditions included to incorporate resiliency and sustainability measures, to coordinate with DEP, DOT, and parks to install rain gardens, curb extensions, and protected intersections. They also requested the developer utilize Brooklyn-based contractors, subcontractors, and especially locally based enterprise and minority women-owned businesses. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Okay, if there are no questions, this is scheduled for a public hearing on Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the 12th item on the agenda is a pre-hearing review of a zoning map and zoning text amendments in Brooklyn Community District 2, and Syed Ahmed is back to present.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Next slide. This application was certified on January 21 and is now scheduled for a pre-hearing review. The applicant is requesting a zoning map amendment from an M12 to an R6A C24 zoning district and a zoning text amendment to establish the project area as an MIH area. The actions would facilitate a proposed mixed-use 4-story building with 11,932 square feet of residential floor area, or 9 apartments, and 4,995 square feet of ground floor commercial space. Next slide. The project area is located at the corner of Gold and Front Street in the Vinegar Hill neighborhood of Brooklyn Community District 2. Next slide. Vinegar Hill is a small neighborhood with historic residential buildings, commercial loft buildings, and industrial uses. The neighborhood is surrounded by large-scale city infrastructure. Next slide. Several blocks along the East River are zoned M31 and are occupied by Con Edison's electric substation and a steam generating plant. A block to the east is Brooklyn Navy Yard. Area to the south is zoned R6A and is developed with NYCHA's 1,400 unit Farragut houses and the entrance to the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. Dumbo is to the west, developed with a mix of residential and commercial loft buildings, industrial uses, and Manhattan Bridge. Next slide. In 1997, the Landmarks Preservation Commission designated 3 small clusters of row houses dating back to 1780s as Vinegar Hill Historic District. Area 2 of the historic district, consisting of 5 attached homes, is directly north of the project area. Next slide. The applicant site is a corner lot currently occupied by a storage shed and few parking spaces. The subject block is split into 2 zoning districts. The northern half is in an R6B residential district. The southern portion of the block is zoned M12, comprising of 4 industrial lots, including applicant's lot 1. Next slide. The proposed rezoning will extend an existing R6A district from the south side of the front street onto the project area. Next slide. The proposed R6A district with an MIH area mapping has an FAR of 3.6, a base height of 65 feet, and the maximum building height of 85 feet or 8 stories. The applicant has chosen to map MIH option 2 on their site. However, MIH requirements apply to projects with at least 10 dwelling units or 12,500 square feet of residential floor area. Since the development proposed by the applicant is below the specified threshold, it would not provide any affordable housing units. Next slide. The Community Board 2 disapproved the application by a vote of 22 in opposition, 2 in favor, and 3 abstentions. The Community Board did not submit any written comments explaining the reasons for their disapproval. Borough President also disapproved the application with the following recommendations: that the applicant should withdraw the current application and refile the application to rezone the site as R6B without an MIH mapping or a commercial overlay. The applicant should incorporate resiliency and sustainability measures, install curb extensions, retain Brooklyn-based minority contractors, and in addition, the Borough President's Office is proposing the applicant provide ground floor parking and engage car share companies to lease ground floor parking spaces on site. In response to Borough President's recommendations, the department disagrees with the recommendation for the applicant to refile a new application for rezoning from M12 to an R6B district and omit MIH mapping on the site. Next slide. The department believes that the proposed R6A C24 district mapped across this street is an appropriate zoning district for the project area. Next slide. In the proposed R6A district mapped across Front Street, there is a 6-story residential building at the corner of Front and Gold Street. Next slide. With no ground floor commercial use, the proposed R6A C24 district has the potential to create 23,454 square feet of residential floor area or 23 dwelling units, of which 7,000 square feet or 7 units would be designated as permanently affordable. With ground floor commercial use, the site would yield 18,454 square feet of residential floor area or 18 dwelling units, of which 5,536 square feet will be for residential use or 5 units would be permanently affordable under the proposed MIH option. Next slide. The department also believes that mapping an R6B zoning district with MIH mapping is not consistent with the Commission's policy of requiring permanently affordable housing in all rezonings that increase residential density and to further economically integrate neighborhoods. Furthermore, mapping of an R6B district would prevent any incentive for the development or support of affordable housing in an area that is close to services, public transportation, and infrastructure. This would also be the first MIH mapping in the Vinegar Hill neighborhood, which is intended to promote neighborhood economic diversity, an important objective in an area where the median household income is $214,000. The department also believes that this is an appropriate site for commercial use, providing opportunities for neighborhood retail close to residential uses. This concludes my presentation. I will be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Syed. Commissioner De La Hoz.
Syed, I appreciate your outline of why the department believes the application is consistent with a number of the city's goals. I would just say that I would build on that further to say that, and seeking MIH option 1 versus option 2, for many of the same reasons that you said, would be more consistent with having more local residents being able to actually afford the 5 MIH units. Do we have any sense, since we didn't get any written feedback from the community board, was there any information that you can share about why they voted no? And do we expect anybody from community board to participate in the hearing?
The community board did not submit a recommendation. There was opposition from the Vinegar Hill Neighborhood Association, and they will be speaking on Wednesday. I think some members of the community will be, speaking at the public hearing.
Okay.
Commissioner Dweck.
Thank you. Syed, I noted the department's objection to the R6B, but I'd like to hear from the developer if they have any objection to coming back with an R6B application.
They will be here on Wednesday. On Wednesday, they will be able to answer these questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Levin.
Yes, in the same vein, it's noted in the briefing sheet that this applicant intends to build below the MIH threshold anyway. So I'm not sure how sort of powerful the comments that you just made, Syed, about the department's position on mapping for affordability here, because it seems that this developer doesn't intend to pursue that course. So I'll be listening to their response to Commissioner Dweck's question with exactly that in mind. I also was taken with the argument in the borough president's recommendation that Front Street really is a boundary between an R6B and an R6A neighborhood. So I think there would be some objection to looking to the building that you cited, Syed, across Front Street as a precedent for an R6A zoning here. And I had one other thought, but it just escaped my brain. Thank you.
You can always come back, Commissioner Levin.
I know what it was. I got it. Okay. The borough president suggests that if were we to attempt to modify this to an R6B, that would be out of scope. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes,
it would be.
Okay. So that's not one of our choices here.
No.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Burney.
Oh, thank you. I think we commented at the pre-certification that this building really should try to have a more contemporary expression in its design. But those comments seem to have fallen on deaf ears. So will the architects be at the hearing on Wednesday?
I think so, but I'm not sure. I think the representative and someone else is speaking. I'm not sure if he's the architect, but
perhaps we could encourage the architect.
The building shown here is for illustrative purposes. We are not sure if that's what they're going to build.
Well,
we can encourage the architect to attend on Wednesday.
Yes.
We can't guarantee it, but we will.
Yeah.
The applicant is listening, and we will ask them to consider that very much.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it's worth noting this is just a mapping action, so we have no control over the design.
That's right.
Well, except the way we vote.
Correct. But we can't make it stick.
Further, Commissioner De La Hoz.
The other question I have is, I'm just kind of seeing this on the screen, that the applicant is proposing to underbuild, and I guess that's just because addressing the community's concerns, but if they could just detail that some more, that would be helpful.
Okay.
And a representative of the, you said Vinegar Hill Association is going to testify. Did you say that?
Yes, that's what I heard. Who will be speaking, we don't know yet.
Okay. Further questions? Okay, this is on for public hearing on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. The 13th item on the agenda is a pre-hearing review of zoning map and zoning text amendments and a special permit in Brooklyn Community District 7. Our presenter is Amy Jin.
Hi, good afternoon. This is an application by 312 Coney Island Avenue LLC for a zoning map amendment to rezone a portion of a block from a C8-2 district to an R8A C2-4 district, zoning text amendments to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area, and to modify setback requirements within the Special Ocean Parkway District, and a special permit to waive required residential accessory parking spaces. These actions will facilitate a 13-story mixed-use, faith-based development with ground floor retail, a church, a school, and a total of 278 residential units, approximately 70 of which would be designated permanently affordable. Next slide, please. The project area is located in the Windsor Terrace neighborhood of Brooklyn Community District 7. Next slide, please. The project area is located on the southwest corner of Park Circle. The project area is an irregularly shaped parcel with frontage on Ocean Parkway, Park Circle, Coney Island Avenue, and Caton Place. The surrounding areas map C82 to the south, R8B to the north, and R7A to the west. C82 is a commercial district that permits commercial and community facility uses. New residential use is not permitted as of right. The maximum FAR for commercial use is 2, and the maximum FAR for community facility use is 4.8. R7A and R8B are contextual residential districts that permit residential and community facility uses. Other districts in the surrounding area include R7B and R5B. The Special Ocean Parkway District encompasses the project area and the surrounding area to the south and southwest. The Special District requires a 30-foot landscape front yard along Ocean Parkway and limits the bulk of permitted community facilities. Recent actions in the area include neighborhood-wide rezonings between 2005 and 2009 to map contextual residential districts west, southwest, and south of the project area. In August 2018, an application was approved for the adjacent lot at 57 Caton Place, rezoning the C82 district to an R7A C24 district to facilitate the construction of a new 9-story mixed residential commercial building. Next slide, please. The surrounding area contains park to the east and a mix of residential, community facility, and some commercial uses to the north, west, and south. Residential buildings are characterized by single-family homes and multi-family apartment buildings up to 9 stories. Community facility uses are characterized by churches and schools of up to 5 stories. Immediately northeast of the project area is Park Circle, a 490-foot wide traffic circle with an approximately 220-foot wide landscaped island. Prospect Park Parade Ground and Prospect Park are located east and northeast of the project area. Prospect Park is a New York City scenic landmark. The project area is well served by public transit with access to the F and G subway lines at Fort Hamilton Parkway Station, 1 block to the west of the project area, and the B68 bus runs north-south along Coney Island Avenue. Next slide, please. Currently, there's a church and a school on the site. Here's the view from Park Circle of the 4-story, 50-foot tall building, which contains approximately 26,000 square feet of floor area with 36 accessory parking spaces. The International Baptist Church is working in partnership with the developers for this project, and the proposed building is designed to accommodate the needs of both the church and the school. Next slide, please. Here are some more views along Ocean Parkway where we can see the 30-foot wide setback. Next slide. The applicant proposes to develop a 13-story mixed-use building with approximately 313,000 square feet of floor area to an FAR of 7.2, with approximately 278,000 square feet of residential use, 30,000 square feet of community facility use in portions of the cellar, first and second floors, and 5,000 square feet of ground floor commercial use. The proposed development contains approximately 278 dwelling units, of which approximately 70 will be designated permanently affordable under option 1 of the mandatory inclusionary housing program. The community facility space will be occupied by the existing church and school, allowing them to expand and modernize their facilities. Next slide, please. So here's another view from Ocean Parkway. In this render, I just want to point out that the proposed project is to the left, and the ghosted building that you see on the right there is the proposed building for 57 Caton Place, the project that was approved in 2018 that I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. The applicant proposes retail along Caton Place to serve local needs and better activate the street along with the proposed retail for the adjacent 57 Caton Place project. The community facility uses will have their entrance on Park Circle, which would maintain the presence of the International Baptist Church from the street level. It's anticipated that the two existing curb cuts on Caton Place will be consolidated into a single curb cut with a width of 9 feet to serve as an entrance to the below-grade parking that accommodates 80 parking spaces, 36 of which would be used by the church and the school. And the remaining 44 parking spaces would be used as flexible parking serving the building and the neighborhood residents, as well as car sharing services. A 30-foot front yard will be provided on Ocean Parkway pursuant to the regulations of the Special Ocean Parkway District. Next slide, please. The height of the proposed development would be 145 feet fronting Park Circle with a gradual step down to the mid-block. The middle portion of the building will rise to approximately 120 feet, while the westernmost portion of the building will rise to 100 feet. This would provide a gradual transition from the mid-block towards the intersection of 3 wide streets. Next slide, please. To facilitate the proposed development, the applicant requests a zoning map amendment to rezone a C82 district to an R8A C24 district, a zoning text amendment to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area with options 1 and 2, and to modify the special bulk regulations of the Special Ocean Parkway District, and a special permit pursuant to section 74-533 to waive the requirements of residential accessory off-street parking. Next slide, please. The proposed zoning map amendment would change the project area from a C82 district to an R8A C24 district. R8A is a residential district which allows a maximum FAR of 7.2 for residential use when mapped within an MIH area and a maximum base height of 105 feet, with a maximum building height of 145 feet with a qualifying ground floor. Off-street parking is generally required for 40% of the non-income restricted housing units, and a C24 is a commercial overlay that permits a maximum FAR of 2 for commercial uses. Next slide, please. The applicant seeks two zoning text amendments, one to Appendix F to designate the project area as a mandatory inclusionary housing area with options 1 and 2. The applicant intends to select MIH option 1. The second zoning text amendment would modify the bulk regulations of the Special Ocean Parkway District to R82, Special Ocean Parkway District to R82 districts mapped on wide streets adjacent to Park Circle, allowing building street walls to rise without setback to the maximum building height. Without the modifications to the bulk, the maximum base height would be 105 feet. The applicant believes the shear rise is appropriate given the presence of 3 wide streets and that it would allow bulk to be shifted away from the lower density residential districts to the west and create a stepped building height. Next slide, please. The applicant also requests a special permit pursuant to section 74-533 to waive the requirement for accessory residential off-street parking spaces. Without the waiver, the project would be required to provide 83 spaces for the residential units. Together with the 36 spaces for the church and the school, the applicant states that the 119 parking spaces would be cost prohibitive and render the project infeasible. The findings for this special permit deal with the facilitation of parking availability and flexibility, as well as the development of affordable housing units under MIH. Next slide, please. CB7 held a public hearing on January 30th, 2020, and on February 19th, 2020, voted to disapprove 2 of the actions with conditions and approve 1 of the actions with conditions. They voted to disapprove the zoning map amendment with conditions changing the proposed R8A district to R7A. They voted to approve the zoning text amendment with conditions, mapping options 1 and 3 for deep affordability, and they voted to approve the amendment to the Ocean Parkway Special District bulk regulations. They voted to disapprove the special permit with conditions that the applicant provide more parking to service the community facility and residential uses. Next slide, please. The board also voted in favor of 13 conditions that address concerns such as traffic, parking, streetscape improvements, housing affordability, accessibility, and sustainability that you can see in the slide. Next slide, please. The borough president held a public hearing on February 12th, 2020, and on September 29th, 2020, recommended to approve the application with the conditions that are shown on screen here. Next slide, please. This is the fourth condition. So there were 4 of them. That is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Amy. Commissioner Dweck.
Thank you. Has the applicant gotten back with regard to the borough president's recommendations? I mean, I can certainly see the R8A on the circle, but the R8A closer to 57K, which we just rezoned in 2018, seems a little aggressive. Perhaps the applicant would be amenable to making the entirety of the site an R7D, which would be more in line with what's in the area. And has he gotten back on the special permit? And I'm sure they're paying attention to the questions today with regard to the parking special permit. With regard to the parking, will they make the accessory spaces that are available to the church available to the community when not in use by the church?
So I haven't heard from the applicant regarding these specific questions. The borough president issued his recommendations late last week. I'm sure that the applicant team is listening to this right now. And so I will relay this information to them if not, and they can address it during the public hearing.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ortiz, to be followed by Commissioner Levin, to be followed by Commissioner Rampershad.
Thank you, Vice Chair Knuckles. My question relates to the ground floor retail on Caton.
Yep.
Yeah, I understand you are suggesting that there's continuity with some existing retail on that street, but could you speak to what's happening across the street? Are we creating a single loaded corridor of retail on that street? Will it be double-sided? Are we, where do people shop now? Is there an existing commercial district that currently meets the needs? Are we replicating that here? Are we, I want us to be a little bit more, particularly in this environment, a little bit more conservative about where we are encouraging retail, and we don't want to create orphaned retail spaces.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So across the street currently is an 8-story self-storage building that's under construction, which is as of right under the C8-2 district. So there will be no ground floor retail in that building. There is no prominent neighborhood commercial spaces, like retail spaces in this area. This area is lacking in neighborhood stores, which is why the department also thinks that this is particularly appropriate given its proximity to the park and the parade grounds. It'll serve as a nice space for people who are...
To play devil's advocate, it's not visible from the park. I think, I don't know how busy that street is, but for most retail planning principles, it doesn't seem to meet the requirements of what we would want for successful retail space. I just continue to have concerns about that. If it were part of a district, if there were some thought given, it reads in every way as orphaned space that is isolated and lacks visibility and doesn't really have the requirements needed for success for businesses, if we want businesses to be successful, so I would just really be cautious about that ground floor use, particularly given what's happening across the street. You know, if it were visible from the park, I could see that being more of an argument, but in fact, it's quite distant from the park. You have to go around a roundabout. You know, so I can't really see that working.
Noted.
Just to jump in, I think that the applicant here is listening and can address that and sort of what their vision is for that. I just also want to note that the R8A, unlike some of our other districts, doesn't mandate a non-commercial ground or non-residential ground floor. And so there is some flexibility. Even with the rezoning, they could repurpose that to some other use, whether that's a community facility or you know, even a residential use. So there's some flexibility in this zoning district.
I want to just emphasize that what Ryan just said, the commercial overlay allows the option to have retail on the ground floor if they so choose. Remember, this is a church, obviously a community facility use, so they're able to fill that space either with a commercial use if it's viable or with a community facility use. So it's merely an option and allows for flexibility.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes, as long as we're talking about ground floor uses, I'm going to ask a design question akin to Commissioner Burney's question on the previous application, and I recognize that on this application we can't do anything about design, but I'm still going to ask. And that has to do with the ground floor treatment along the circle frontage. You know, there's a lot in this application that is reminiscent of the application we had for the La Hermosa Church on Duke Ellington Circle in Manhattan, where we spent a lot of time questioning the applicant, and I believe the same architect as here, about the treatment of the ground floor facade. And so I hope they can tell us tomorrow a little bit more about how they intend to design the ground floor of the circle frontage of this building and how it's going to engage well and be activated around the circle. And then I have to say, I'm very sympathetic to the arguments of the concerns that the community board and the borough president have about the R8A here. And I'm going to be listening carefully because I have in mind that I'm kind of on board with what they had to say. That's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Ramprashad.
Yeah, I'm going to add on to that. I was just curious, how is the applicant team responding to the community board's recommendations, and if they can speak to all, was it 13 points they had here? So I'd be interested to hear from them on Wednesday. That's all. Thank you.
Amy and Winston, I believe I had raised during the briefing that I thought we could benefit from a rendering that depicted the ground floor presence of these community, respective community facilities and how they interact with each other and where they are in proximity to the residential entrance. So if it's possible, I'd like to see that in the presentation as well.
Yeah, I will let the applicant know. I can tell you quickly that so the commercial use, the entrance will be on Caton Place, like we talked about. The church and the school will be fronting on Park Circle, and then there will be entrances for the residential use along Ocean Parkway and on Caton Place as well.
Okay, if we could, see how that translates visually, it would, I think, enhance our understanding of the project. Other questions?
Yeah,
okay.
Vice Chair, I raised my hand up.
Commissioner, go ahead.
Yeah, just speaking of renderings, is there a rendering with an R7D by any chance that we could?
No, there is not.
There is not. All right, if the applicant could provide us with if they have one, I know it's 2 days away, if they have a rendering showing what an R7D would look like on site, that would be useful too. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, this is on for public hearing on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Okay, the 14th item on the agenda is a pre-hearing review of a zoning map and zoning text amendments in Brooklyn Community District 16. Our presenter is Anthony Grande.
Good afternoon, commissioners. This is a private application by Bridge Rockaway Housing Development Fund Company for zoning map and text amendments to facilitate the development of a new 100% affordable 7-story mixed-use development containing 174 units of supportive and affordable housing, in addition to ground floor light manufacturing and community facility spaces at 803 Rockaway Avenue in the Brownsville neighborhood of Brooklyn, Community District 16. Next slide, please. The project area, as I mentioned, is located in the Brownsville neighborhood of Brooklyn, Community District 16. Next slide. The proposed project area is the majority of the block bounded by Rockaway Avenue, Newport Street, Thetford Avenue, and Riverdale Avenue, with a total of 79,000 square feet of lot area. The development site outlined in blue is a 46,000 square foot through lot with frontages on Rockaway, Thetford, and Newport. The surrounding area is primarily residential with a variety of densities and built forms, with higher densities and commercial uses concentrated primarily along Rockaway Avenue and Livonia Avenue. The project area is within an M11 district, which is also found on 2 separate blocks to the south. However, the surrounding area is primarily zoned R6, which is a medium density residential district. An R7-2 district is located 1 block to the west and also along Livonia Avenue, which was mapped recently in the Marcus Garvey rezoning. M11 districts are low density districts that allow commercial and industrial uses to a maximum of 1 FAR with a high parking requirement. M11 districts do not permit residential uses. Next slide. Okay. The project area's western frontage is on Rockaway Avenue, which is the primary north-south corridor in Brownsville for commercial uses and higher density residential development and a bus line. The width of Rockaway Avenue varies between 70 and 80 feet on this block. The development site, outlined in blue again, contains several 1-story industrial buildings, which had been used for decades as a chocolate syrup manufacturing building, but recently had been vacated. Additionally, there's some space for surface parking on the lot. To the north are 2 non-applicant owned lots within the rezoning area. On the Rockaway frontage is a 1-story commercial building with a laundromat. And on the Thetford frontage, there's a 2-story building with a warehouse and a house of worship. On the southwest corner of the project area, there's a city-owned parcel, which is used by a community garden run by DPR's Green Thumb program. The area is well served by transit. The Rockaway Avenue 3 train station is about 1 block to the north. Next slide. This is a view of the project area from Rockaway Avenue looking north. In the center of the photo is the development site with the existing 1-story industrial building. To the right is the city-owned community garden. Next slide, please. And this is Rockaway Avenue, again, but facing south. In the center of this photo is the non-applicant owned lot in the rezoning area, which is the 1-story laundromat building with the parking in front. Next slide. This is the southeast corner of the project area. The industrial building within the development site is seen here. Next slide. And this is a view down Thetford Avenue looking south. So here we see the other non-applicant owned site with the 2-story building with the warehouse and a house of worship. Next slide, please. The proposed development would be a new 7-story, 183,000 square foot mixed use building. Back up one slide, please. Okay. The proposed development would be a new 7-story, 183,000 square foot mixed use building with approximately 39,000 square feet of ground floor light manufacturing space, 2,000 square feet of ground floor community facility space, and approximately 174 units of supportive and affordable housing. The applicants are proposing a unique opportunity for a nonprofit, affordable, and supportive housing provider and a mission-driven industrial nonprofit to develop a new mixed-use model. The residential component would be operated by the nonprofit applicant organization, providing social services on site for building residents. Supportive units would be for formerly homeless, and affordable units would be for families and individuals at a maximum of 60% AMI. The building would have a total FAR of 3.97. Building bulk is distributed into a Rockaway Avenue portion, which is the 7-story portion seen there, and then the Thetford Avenue portion, which would be 6 stories tall. And this responds to the different conditions on each frontage. Next slide, please. The ground floor of the proposed building would be a full lot coverage floor. The majority of the space would be the 39,000 square foot light industrial space, which would be divided into several smaller spaces to be tenanted to individual manufacturers. The ground floor industrial component would be managed by the Greenpoint Manufacturing and Design Center, GMDC, a nonprofit organization that specializes in tenanting light manufacturing spaces for smaller businesses at affordable rates. The applicants worked with DCP to develop zoning that supports the mission of both nonprofits, allowing GMDC to manage the tenanting and permitting, which can be cumbersome for small businesses. The space would be accessed by an entrance on Rockaway Avenue and would be served by a 2-bay loading dock, also on Rockaway Avenue at the northern edge of the site. In the southeast corner of the site, there would be an approximately 2,200 square foot community facility space with an entrance on Thetford Avenue. The residential entrance would be located on Newport Street, and the proposed building, being 100% affordable and within the transit zone, would provide no off-street parking spaces. Next slide, please. The proposed development would provide windows at certain intervals along the lot line with the community garden, as well as transparency at the 2nd floor common spaces and the ground floor community facility space. Next slide. The manufacturing space, street level frontage would be a mix of non-transparent materials and vertical windows at certain intervals. Next slide. In order to facilitate the proposed development, the applicant requests 2 actions. First is a zoning map amendment. The project area is proposed to be changed from an M11 district to an M14 R7A district, an M14 R6A district, while mapping special mixed use district MX19 over the project area. The R7A district is mapped over the western portion of the block, which has frontage on Rockaway Avenue, which is the major street in the area and is a wide street. The R6A district is proposed to be mapped on the eastern portion of the block, which has frontage on Thetford Avenue, which is a narrow street. Our M14 districts are medium density industrial and commercial districts that allow up to 2.0 FAR for a range of commercial and light industrial uses. There's no parking requirement in the M14 district. R7A districts are medium density districts that allow residential and community facility uses. Residential uses are allowed to a maximum of 4.6 FAR, with MIH. Buildings must follow a contextual building envelope with a maximum base height of 75 feet and a maximum total height of 95 feet. R6A districts are similar to the R7A, but slightly lower density, allowing 3.6 FAR for residential use, a base height of 65 feet and a total height of 85 feet. Next slide, please. The applicant seeks a zoning text amendment for two separate sections of the zoning resolution. First is an amendment to section 123-222. The added text would create a new mechanism for allowing mixing of uses that is more responsive and flexible to small business needs and supports the mission of both nonprofits. This mechanism would require a restrictive declaration to be approved by DEP, enforcing building design requirements to allow the uses to safely coexist. The restrictive declaration would need to be filed prior to obtaining a building permit. It is expected that the restrictive declaration would include three main design requirements. A separate ventilation system for the industrial space would ventilate air to above the roof line. Acoustic separation would be required between the ground floor and the upper floors, and vibration prevention systems would be required for the industrial space. The applicant has built these measures into the design of the proposed building. Next slide. The applicant proposes a text amendment to Appendix F to add the project area as an MIH area, mapping option 1. Next slide, please. This application was certified on February 3rd, 2020. On June 23rd, Brooklyn Community Board 16 held a public hearing and voted to approve the application with conditions, 22 in favor and 6 opposed. The condition from the community board stated that they recommend the developers provide off-street parking spaces. On September 2nd, the Brooklyn Borough President issued a recommendation to approve the application with conditions. There was a list of conditions directed towards the applicants, which included permanent affordability for the entirety of the building, discussion of utilizing locally based organization as an administering agent, regarding the supportive units, particularly recruitment and outreach with local Community District 16, as well as outreach to seniors. In terms of the building itself, recommendations included resiliency and sustainability measures, as well as pedestrian improvements and rain gardens. A recommendation was directed towards GMDC, asking them to commit to how they would do outreach to local manufacturers in the area. And then conditions specifically for the city. The borough president recommended for HPD to modify the housing lottery system to include school zones. Regarding DHS, reaching out to DYCD shelters for referrals, and for the City Planning Commission, modifying MIH to permit households with rent burden status to qualify for MIH units. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Anthony. Questions? Commissioner De La Hoz, followed by Commissioner Levin.
I'll just be interested to hear from GMDC. I see that there's one loading dock. It'll be interesting to understand how they expect that to be used with multiple industrial tenants. So that's my main question. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm interested in just hearing a little bit more from GMDC about the kinds of tenants they imagine attracting to this facility and the kinds of industrial activity that they might see. When this was certified, we had questions about the on the opaque screens in front of the ground floor industrial spaces.
Facades on Rockaway Avenue, I think it was.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
We had questions about what kind of signage some of the industrial tenants might be interested in having and whether that would be permissible, whether there might be accessory retail. Would the retail need transparency? I think if we hear from GMDC a little bit more about their vision for tenants here, and then have a conversation with them about how this ground floor space is most suitable to those tenants, that'll be an interesting conversation.
Yep, and GMDC will have a representative, it's my understanding, at the public hearing, so I think they can address those questions.
Great, thank you.
Further questions? There being none, this item is on for public hearing on Wednesday.
Okay, moving on to future votes. Also just want to know we're in the home stretch, so if people need to turn off their video and stretch, you can do that, but we're almost done here. For Wednesday, October 7th, 2020, staff have prepared reports for 110-40 Saltell Avenue, the DSNY Queens Sanitation Garage 1. Also scheduled for a decision on Wednesday are 120 Bayview Avenue and 272 and 280 Edinburgh Road, both in Staten Island. If there are any questions on any of the above items, you can raise your hand or just interrupt me. Okay, seeing none. For post-hearing follow-ups, Hai Kyung Yang is here to discuss the Special Flushing Waterfront District. Okay.
Hey everyone. Good afternoon, commissioners. Here we go. The Special Flushing Waterfront District returns as a post-hearing item. Next slide. This post-hearing will cover items 1 through 5, which include discussions on waterfront maintenance and publicly accessible private streets, bike paths, blank walls in the special district, accessibility of public space without pay, and access to the waterfront's edge. On the upcoming October 19th post-hearing, I will cover items 6 through 9, which include public use of PAPs, environmental review, ability to develop residential uses in lieu of hotel floor area, and indirect or secondary displacement in the broader Flushing context. Next slide, please. The first topic addresses the question on who is responsible for what, and if the responsible party fails, who ends up taking care of it, and what safeguards do we have in place. On waterfront maintenance, Section 6272 of the zoning resolution and its associated to Section 6274 has specific language on the role of the city and agencies involved, including parks and DOB and their responsibilities. Section 6272 have specific performance maintenance requirements, including language that state that the property owner shall be responsible for the completion and maintenance of all required waterfront public access areas on the zoning lot. No certificate of occupancy shall be issued until all required WPAA improvements are completed, except as otherwise provided in a phasing plan pursuant to other sections of the waterfront regulatory text. In addition, the text states that to ensure the maintenance of the WPAA prior to obtaining any certificate of occupancy, the property owner shall provide security in the form of a maintenance bond, letter of credit, or other security acceptable to the Parks Department with an amount certified by a registered architect or landscape architect sufficient to cover 125% of the cost of maintaining WPAA for a 12-month period following final completion of such area. The security shall be replaced every 5 years, and the security shall be in effect for the life of the development. In addition, feedback and coordination from DEC, Parks, FDNY, DP, DOT, and PDC is required as review for safety, accessibility, resilience, design, maintenance, and sustainability. Lastly, regarding publicly accessible private streets, City Planning and DOT have agreed to a regulatory framework to effectively address private streets maintenance and operation issues. They include requirements that prior to obtaining building permits, each developer will have to seek a certification of interim and final design for the street segments that border the lot being developed. The certification will be reviewed and issued by DCP in consultation with DOT. And noted during review session, developers will not be able to pull a TCO or FCO until the approved designs are built out and a restrictive declaration is recorded. The RD outlines several requirements, including a public easement provide 24-hour access to the streets and sidewalks unless closed for repairs, which require notifying DCP and DOT. Specifies operational specs as to roadway markings, traffic signs, and parking, and the creation of an umbrella organization that will be responsible for the PAPs across all the sites. Street maintenance and capital repair reserves are to be maintained by the umbrella organization, and a maintenance bond provided by the developers to the city equaling to 125% of 5-year assessed maintenance and anticipated capital repair cost. Further, a monitoring agreement with a private company would inspect all improved build-out private street for compliance with operational specifications 4 times a day, every day of the year, including a towing contract that provides a standby towing service in coordination with a private monitoring company to immediately remove any illegal parked vehicles. Next slide, please. On bike paths, the dimension of the WPAA limits the feasible inclusion of a dedicated 2-way bike path. Within the WPAA, there is a required primary 12-foot wide circulation path that must be provided within the 40-foot wide short public walkway. The 12-foot wide dimension is meant to provide for safe and efficient pedestrian circulation and does not factor in the inclusion of cyclists. On some sites, this path is pushed to the upland half of the short public walkway in order to comply with DEC wetland adjacent measures that the landscape design must accommodate. Lastly, bike path planning was coordinated with DOT's bike planners during the design process, and they advised allowing bikes in the special district in an unmarked shared format within the private street network and did not suggest a designated bike lane within the WPAA. This section of the Site 2, Development Site 2, shows the spatial constraints that the development sites have. Between the shoreline and the point labeled TWAA is where DEC approval is required for the design. Next slide, please. On blank walls in the special district, the proposed regulations incorporate the urban design provisions that already exist for recently adopted special districts, including East Harlem, Harlem River Waterfront District, and Inwood Special District. The regulation consists of a set of minimum and maximum amount of mitigation measures that could be used for a given length of wall to ensure variety and visual interest. Specifically, for instance, a 50-foot long blank wall must have at least 25% planting. The rest of the wall can be mitigated with bike racks, benches, tables, and chairs. In addition, the transparency requirements of the special district, as with the other districts, require that ground floor use can be non-residential uses. And if such use is group parking, it must be wrapped and screened, and all ground floors must be glazed with the minimum transparency requirements. This proposed special district of this district uses identical language used in the previously adopted special districts. Next slide, please. On accessibility of the waterfront publicly accessible areas and publicly accessible areas, the use of the WPAAs and optional PAA will be governed by a restrictive declaration and parks regulations. The WPAA will be accessible to the public from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. free of charge all year round. The PAA will close earlier at 10 p.m. because of its frontage to hotel entrance, and access will also be free of charge. Projects mentioned at the September 16th public hearing, such as One Fulton, do not contain regulated public spaces. One Fulton is located inland at Prince Street and 39th Avenue and is an as-of-right mixed-use building that provides retail use on the ground and second floor with a mall-like design. Whereas one may have to pay access for One Fulton, No payment is at all required to access the waterfront and plaza area in the special Flushing Waterfront District. Lastly, on access to the waterfront's edge, in addition to city planning and parks review, the waterfront design requires DEC and Army Corps of approval. The applicants must follow guidance and approval from the state and federal agencies before access to the waterfront's edge is permitted. Thank you. Thank you.
Is that it?
Yes.
Thank you. Any questions for Hai Kang? Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like Commissioner Levin has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is going to sound like a little nitpicky detail in the face of the larger issues that we're dealing with here. But on your answer about the blank wall provisions, are you sure that the zoning text works properly? I mean, I appreciate that this is a tool that we have applied in other areas, but there is a phrase in there that requires that provides a list of the mitigation or softening techniques that you properly identified, but just says that you have to have one or more of them, and it was the one or more that I tripped over. Just take a look at. I'd like to be assured that that zoning text as written really works as we intend it to, so that those blank walls are properly softened. Because if you could only have to apply one of those things, I don't think it's going to be good enough on some of these very long walls.
Absolutely. I did ask around and ask around our zoning division, and they had noted that no one had raised, at least in the prior districts that I listed that had the identical verbiage, that no one had raised any issues about them to date. But I absolutely understand your concern.
Yeah, just think about whether that's something that we've all overlooked for too long and might need to get fixed here. Because I mean, as you explained the intent, we ought to be sure that the language matches the intent that you described, which the intent is fine for me.
Right.
Similarly nitpicky about the streetscape. Can you assure me that the street tree provisions apply here? Because as I read the zoning, you only have to plant street trees if you're getting an upzoning, and we're not upzoning here. So are these guys going to be required to plant street trees?
I will confirm, but my gut is telling me yes, because they have these waterfront requirements.
But not just on the waterfront, I'm thinking in the upland portions as well.
If I may, this is William, the NCP Council's office. The answer to that is yes. Street trees will be required pursuant to a certification and the underlying.
Okay, and that's going to be written down someplace that we can all have confidence is going to happen.
Yes, in the restrictive declaration, and the only exception to that will be where there are interim measures for the streets, and the interim design does not allow possibly for street trees, then there will be a period of time where.
Okay, all right, so it's in the restrictive declaration, not the way zoning applies here.
Correct.
Okay, good. If council's office has the answer, then you know it's really going to happen.
Hi, Ken, on the question of the possible transformation of hotels usage to residential.
Mm-hmm. I will address that at the October 19th post hearing.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, if there are any further questions on the DeKalb Commons project. Okay, seeing none on that. And then regarding 5902 Borden Avenue, there was a letter from the applicant in your package. The department is working on putting together some additional information on this application for the commission. And if there are any further questions at this time, we can take them and then work with the applicant to address them at a future review session.
Ryan, this is Raj. Yeah, I'd actually address one of the questions I had, which was the clarification about the Valente Yeast Company. I believe that was the one gentleman that was interested in the property.
Sure.
So I'm glad that they addressed that. But I look forward to seeing the commission's next report on this.
Sure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes, thank you, Ryan, for indicating that there may be more information to come. I'm particularly interested in, thank you to the applicant for volunteering to respond to the considerations, which really go beyond what the applicant has to prove, and it's stuff that we're supposed to think about. But I appreciate having the applicant's thoughts on it. But I would be interested in whether the department has any further information for us on considerations A and B, and that is whether this use is consistent with the economic development objectives of the city, and secondly, which is the B part, whether there is a minimal demand for industrial space at this location. Because I think the thing I'm worried about, and I know other commissioners are as well, and which was a thread through the when we created the special permit, is we do not want industrial uses to have to compete in the commercial marketplace for land. And some of the information that we've heard about this application makes me worry that that's exactly what's happening here.
Okay.
So we have to deal with these considerations on our own, and so I would appreciate any additional information that the department may have to provide us on those 2 points.
Can support the commission in that, in helping understand those things. Yes.
Thank you.
Great. That's very helpful. Okay. And then last but certainly not least, on the Rikers Island public place mapping, I will just note that there's currently no further information available. The application remains as it was certified. And I will also just note that, we had a pretty complete discussion of the public place mapping and designation at the last review session. If there's any further questions about that, particular mapping designation, our general counsel is here. I know sometimes things settle and questions come up that people didn't ask in the first instance. So that is what we have on that item.
Well, discussions are ongoing, are they not, Ryan?
They are ongoing, yes. And we expect to have information, that we can share with the commission, and we'll share it as soon as possible. So, stay tuned. We'll have either packages or even just separate emails, and then a discussion at the next review session. Okay.
Okay. Any other items for discussion today?
No, there are not, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay. Well, before we depart, commissioners, if you haven't seen it, I would call to your attention an email from our chair from earlier today, in which she describes her recuperation as proceeding swimmingly. So that's good news. I'm not sure whether or not she'll be at our next meeting. She told me that was her intent. Hopefully, if her progress continues, she will be. If not, I guess she'll be stuck with me again. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention. She is recuperating well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, commissioners. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
See you Wednesday.
Okay, bye.
Bye, everyone.